last year was one of the worst downswings of your life.
Yeah, it was a big downswing in terms of like how big of a percentage of my net worth I lost. It was over half.
Today we will be chatting with Argentinian high-stakes cash game player Mateo Urretavizcaya, better known as schyllae online.
Whatever times it takes to recover, like I think you are gonna make it, and I think you think the same of me.
Mateo's big dream was to become a professional basketball player, but after that seemed unattainable, he transitioned into poker.
Michael Jordan's your role model because he's got this kind of fiery nature to him. Now you're playing poker and you've got this aggression in you, this wanting to kind of kill the opposition, but you realize that, oh, wait a second, I need to use this differently. Yeah. So how are you directing that differently at this poker tables?
I mean, you have to try and think more strategically. I think Michael Jordan made a pretty bad gambler. I would say we probably made a really bad poker player.
It only took Mateo 3 years to reach high stakes, and he's been one of the bigger winnings over the past year.
People that really want it will get there.
Mateo loves the competition, which we see back in his game selection, often being very active in the 3- and 4-handed battles online.
It's gonna sound stupid, but I saw the best players. Like I don't know why this. I would like to someday sit with this guy and try and beat him. That was my goal from the beginning.
How are you problem solving? All right, I'm slightly behind these guys right now, but I'm gonna catch up.
We are humans. You can usually see someone making a mistake even they're really good, so you can chew on that and feel like, ha, I'm doing this. He's human, fuck him, right? I can maybe beat it.
What do you think are like the ups and downside of then simplifying your strategy?
I think simplifying is still like really good. You spend much less of your brain frequency or like the amount of your brain power, but you only have like one direction. You just bet more often or less often. Like if you bet one side, but if you have a lot of complex stuff, like you can go in very different dimensions, and you're thinking about how should I exploit the TheWakko. You only have one direction.
Unexploitable.
Whoa.
Before we dive into today's episode, I have a quick announcement as we have opened up new spots for our Mechanics of Poker coaching program. This is the most comprehensive poker coaching program on the market, as me and Adam help guide your career, give you a clear direction, and teach you everything you need to know in order to achieve more success in poker and in life. So if you think you have what it takes to master the mechanics of poker, go over to mechanicsofpoker.com or use the link in the description below to apply, and maybe you will be selected to join the Mechanics of Poker coaching community. Mateo, your poker journey started during the pandemic, so pretty recently actually. I guess like many people in the world, you were locked indoors with nothing else to do than play online poker. I was wondering, did you have a job at the time? Were you studying? And why did you decide to transition into playing poker full time?
Well, actually, the way I got into poker, it was pretty funny. I remember it was like maybe 6 months before the pandemic. I watched like a guy that I met like back in the day, like maybe from my primary school, like when we were like 8 years old, and he on Instagram, and he was playing poker live in a casino. Like this guy wasn't very brilliant back in the day. Like so I used to like poker when I was young, like watch the WSOP and stuff. So I tried my luck at the casino maybe a couple of months before, and I started going regularly. And then I met some online guys there once. I don't know why or how, but we went for dinner and they were playing like, I don't know, 100 NL or 200 NL online, and they told me how, now if you really like the game, you have to play online. You have to play like. So they planted the seed into me. So I already thought, well, I would like to try that. And then basically with the pandemic, I was forced to. So yeah, I mean, I was studying at the time for my university. So I did both like 6 months, and then in the pandemic, it was much easier to do both at the same time because like all the classes, all the lessons of the university were online. So I did both. And yeah, that's where I started my online career, if you will.
It's very common that you hear players talk about, they were studying, but then they were also playing poker on the side. And whenever they put effort into poker, studying would suffer. And when they would put effort into study, poker would suffer. You experienced something similar? I know that you are.
Yeah.
You're still doing the university, right? Which is, big props. You're doing both things at the same time.
I mean, I'm not doing anything at the moment. I just have like a final project, a thesis, if you will. That's I still have to do before I get my degree. All the other stuff I've finished. But I've been like putting that or in the to-do list for like a couple, like 1 year and a half or so. Just because I don't, it won't change my life or anything, but it's just a milestone, and I already studied for so long, and I really like the career anyways. It's not like I regret it. But yeah,
What
back
what
in the pandemic,
what did you
for
study for the audience?
electronic engineering.
Hmm.
Yeah, in the university here of Argentina, which is pretty damn good. And yeah, but it is really, it really helped me with understanding some stuff about poker, and I always liked that math and that stuff. So it, yeah. But yeah, of course, when I first started playing poker, I just didn't like, if I didn't care very much about university. I was just like something I did because I had to, kind of. But like, yeah.
Could you maybe give an example? You said that like studying electronic engineering helped you understand poker in a better way. Did you maybe have an example?
Yes, a lot of the probability stuff really makes sense. All of the really mathematical aspects of poker, um, yeah, understanding the distribution of how you model the hands and the win rate and all the stuff. I really had the theory of that, and I knew that beforehand. I had studied that previously. So, and also I think when you go to these universities, or when you study like a very math oriented career, or like, they teach you to be very logic in how your thought process. Like, you receive a problem, you're like, well, I have this data, whatever. And usually logic people are drawn to those careers as well. So I think it reinforces a way of thinking, and that is kind of useful for poker, because I still have friends, and there are some people that are like intuitive, or like, I don't know, you're playing a game and they roll a dice and it goes really high, and they're not thinking about probabilities in their whole life. And I was like that beforehand, like, I don't know, like, have you ever played like Settlers of Catan, for example, that board game?
Dude, there was exactly something that popped up in my mind when you said it. Go on.
Yeah, like, I have a friend that, like, he will put the settlement in the number 12, or like the most unlikely roll of dice, because he just feels it. And like, I would never be like, of course, after poker, you would not allow yourself to do that, right? But like, even before, I would never do that either, because I was thinking about, nah, that just doesn't work, right? So I think, yeah, I think the university and all the, like, sometimes math theory that you don't really apply, because you're not really a mathematician in the end when you study engineering. But all of those, like, mathematical stuff helps you build your logic, I think, or your thought process. So I think that was really useful. So I don't regret it, even I'm not planning on use it at the moment. But
Yeah, it's so funny, right? We're so used to thinking in that way, that especially when you play in the Settlers of Catan, they're like, okay, well, you can put it on 6 or 8, which is the highest, probability number. But then they're like, yeah, well, I played less time and I had 6, and it just never came.
yeah,
It always fell on 4. So today I'm gonna build my settlement on 4. Or they have like
yeah,
a great spot with a lot of resources on 6 and 8, for example, maybe combined even. But they're gonna upgrade their other settlement to a city because 6 and 8 are not
because
falling. You
yeah,
know?
exactly, yeah. Jack for suited is my favorite hand. That's
Yeah,
basically
exactly.
it.
And like, it's funny
Yeah.
because I play with my wife quite a lot, and sometimes I get a bit tilted. I'm like, I've explained this a million times. Like, are you really gonna think like a fish? But she keeps on thinking like a fish. It's really interesting. In terms of other, like, obviously there was the logical thinking that resonated really well with poker. What else attracted you to poker in the beginning? And I'm also curious, like, what keeps you interested in the game up until today?
I think it's but at the beginning, I think it was the competitive aspect for sure, like competing. But I would say, and I have to be honest, like at first also, when you're a broke kid, like, or you don't have a lot of money, also the money kind of attracts you at first. That's just how it is, right? Like being able to play a game and you read that, oh, you can make money if you study, whatever. That's also attractive. And it feels like much less of a work, much less work than other jobs.
Yeah,
Just
and you
because
met
you
these
kind of
guys,
enjoy
right? They
playing
were
anyways.
playing 100 and 200 now, I think you mentioned. They probably mentioned like
Yeah,
some numbers that they were making. I know you're from Argentina, so if you make dollars, you
yeah,
know, and you spend it in pesos,
yeah,
top of my mind.
yeah.
Uh,
Always, yeah, exactly. And I don't think they told me exactly how much they were making, but they were saying how, yeah, they basically, I was like, I have been going for like a few months to a casino and like whatever you can make there or like the level you see, it was very, very like, you didn't see the world, like you cannot aspire, like when you switch to online and you see the panorama, you see like, oh, there's this guy's playing in a table of like no limit 40K, and imagine how much money they have, and then so it kind of broadens your spectrum of like, oh, I can be this, and I don't have to like root to be like the best player in my card room, and so I think I kind of like, yeah, that's what happened a little bit. So thankful to them again.
what is about the competing? You mentioned you really liked the competitive aspect about poker. What is it about competing that really attracts you? Like, how does competition make you feel that it draws you towards it?
Um, I don't know. I just really like winning. I don't know. Like even since I was a kid, I always, maybe it's because I don't know. Like I always loved winning, hated losing, and sometimes to the point of like not the healthiest level, I would say. Um, but yeah, since I played basketball my whole life since I was a kid, I was very passionate about that, and really wanted to make it there at the beginning. It was my plan. I think that the competitive was like a given, right? I would not have been myself if I wasn't as competitive. And I just applied it to poker, although maybe it's a little bit different. But like, yeah, that initially like being able to outplay someone, that's where the most fun aspect of it, I think.
The ability to outplay someone really, it's a nice boost. I get it. Like especially, I obviously play poker way longer. I started way before you started. Especially in the beginning when you didn't have like solver strategies, and it was basically all the decisions were more exploitative. So you could take way more credit in winning. Where now, for example, if you just execute a solid strategy, it's almost like you take a little bit less credit. You also find
Yeah,
like
that's true.
if you make a nice exploit, those are the most satisfying. Instead of like, oh, he just walks into my strategy that there's not
Yeah.
much you can do. But when I really push someone into a corner and he does exactly what I wanted him to do, and I was one step ahead, that's when it's most satisfying.
Yeah, or like maybe when you back in the day when with no solvers and stuff, like when you like start using a certain sizing in a texture, and then after 1 year everyone uses the sizing, and maybe you can feel like, well, maybe they didn't copy, but I was right before, and so you can feel all of that, and that's probably very nice. And I really think I would have had a lot of fun in the pre-solver era, to be honest. But yeah, I don't know, like it's impossible to check.
You mentioned that sometimes your competitiveness would reach a level that was maybe not considered very healthy. Do you maybe have an example that stands out?
From my childhood, I don't know, like because all my idols growing up, like basketball players, I always loved the fact that they were like all this, like I thought it was a good thing, right? Like being relentless or being like competitive to the point of being like, so I thought that was like the positive aspect. Like my favorite player was Michael Jordan, of basketball growing up, and even though he was super talented and like I think the thing I could compare at least to him more because I couldn't jump like him, but like I wasn't as tall, but like the thing I could compare or like try to replicate was like the viciousness, the competitiveness. I remember once I read a story about the guy, and they were like, they were doing this trip with all the Chicago Bulls, their team, and the guy who was also a little bit of a gambler, I think, and that shows in the latest like Last Dance series. But like he basically bets all of his friends, like, you know what, my luggage will come up first of the luggage thing, and then he goes and pays $50 to the guys at the plane and has his luggage go first. And it's only to win. I don't know. The guy's making $1 million per year, and he just wants to like hustle their friends for $100, And that the fact that he wants to be like this guy, he says he's, he wants to demonstrate he's the best. Like that mindset, I think it's fabulous, and I think, but it's a little bit, sick in the mind. But I think that's just fabulous. And then I'll hear all those stories. I was like, wow, I think that's the way. That's the way you gotta be in life. So yeah.
How did you apply like that mindset to poker? For example, I can imagine if you're very competitive,
Oh,
do you have like enemies at the table? Do you take things very personally?
I don't think. Yeah, I used to maybe more back in when I started, but I still, yeah. I mean, that's. Yeah, I think I do take things personally, or like if I see someone doing something that I don't think is correct or I could exploit, I go like, okay, let's bring it. But I think since poker is like more of a long-term game, you don't see the immediate gain, so you have to be careful, and your mind it's not as quick to process that, so you have to like put your competitive aspect more into a calm down spot, right? Because even though if you think you're better, you don't know, but even if you are, you're not gonna win. Like it's not chess, right? You're not gonna win every hand or whatever. So, but yeah, especially when I started, and you started like having these rivalries when you're playing online. You have these rivalries versus some breaks. Like you're playing 50 NL, and you see always that Croatian reg that he's crazy and have notes, and I would go crazy. I would love that. That was why I played that for sure at the beginning. Yeah.
Do you take countries personal as well? You mentioned Croatian. Any specific countries that you have more of a hate relationship with? You're like, oh, there's another Brazilian. I know you're Argentinian. You guys, Argentina, Brazil, very competitive. Does it also show at the poker tables?
No, I don't think there's like I think.
You don't check country before you call?
I do sometimes, especially from I think it's more important for recreational, I think, to check like the country, but I think, yeah, it just popped one country in my mind because I remember there was like this reg when I started playing GG, I think, Russian cash. I remember there was a Croatian reg, and it's sometimes amazing when you see the same regs you were playing, and they're still like playing this, sort of the similar stakes that you were playing back then. It's kind of sick. Like you see the same screen name. Of course, I don't remember right now, but yeah.
You mentioned that basketball was basically the thing that motivated you the most, especially in the beginning. You were trying and become pro. In the end, you said that you kind of realized you were probably not good enough to make it as a professional basketball player, so that dream was maybe sort of gone. How did you take that realization? Did it have any like impact on your confidence, your self-belief, maybe also going into poker?
Well, it wasn't first of all, it's not that I'm not good enough, because I did get to be like a semi-professional. I got paid for it, but it was like the third league, and it was just not good enough for what I expected for myself. So I decided, okay, it's like I would have to have lived a very frugal and not comfortable life, maybe if I wanted to be a pro, and I would have and then after maybe at 35 years old, I would be like, now what do I do? I have like $1,000 saved to my name, so I would have be able to do it, but it just wasn't, I don't know. Some things happened, and I kind of like lost the passion for 1 or 2 years, and then I transitioned and I found this poker thing. So it helped me to like put all the passion that all the fire that we as a person have into something else, and that also helped me transition. So yeah, I didn't take it. I wasn't sad or anything. It was just I just moved on, and I still love the game. And then after the pandemic, which I didn't do anything. After that, I came back, and now I'm playing, and I have like, and I train, and I do have like I want to become a little bit better than I am, but just with another like more of a hobby mindset. Uh, but beforehand, it was more like I want to make it. But like I think also once you start playing, like I played that league that was a little bit better than I would usually play, and you see like how other people play, you also get put more in your place, and and you know get more real with yourself in how long or how high can you go. And I realized I was capped, and you know, and it's fine because in terms of percentile wise, I was usually much better than the other people. But in terms of absolute, like I would never like be really good. I would never get to the first division of Argentina even, which is not that bad. But like, yeah. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, it's time to do something else. And I was fine with it. Yeah, it was not hard at all. Yeah.
You then started to focus more on poker. When did you start experiencing like your first successes in poker?
I think I focused in university for a couple of months, and then I found poker. So the university central, the part of the university being the central part of my life, lasted really low. And I think I had like a couple of months playing live, which I was like basically a fish, and then I started like reading. I think I was just smart enough to realize that I should not listen to people in the casino what they're talking about and just study elsewhere. So I started, and unfortunately, I started reading, I know, Jonathan Little books or whatever. Like, but like at least I was like finding out for myself. So eventually I got to better content, and then I improved. And I think I had like 1 or 2 months of winning a decent amount of money just before the pandemic, which of course that doesn't mean I was enjoying success, because in live poker, you just, the variance is insane. And I think that first year of 2020, I was like very swingy, and I think I started playing for everything and like becoming a pro the next year. So I would say 2021 was the first year where I you know took a stride. Like I enjoyed success, if you will. The first year was very bumpy, I think.
When you experience like these bumps on the road, I don't think, like obviously in basketball it's more like you play a good game and you get rewarded for it. Poker is very much the opposite. You can play very well, but you know the swings will be there. That didn't discourage you from pursuing poker. How did you handle the fact that poker had so much swings?
It's so hard because yeah, I don't know. It's just, I think I was doing so much poker and I had so much love for the game just from the get-go, that I didn't even care. Like, first of all, I would just play so often, so much. Like maybe I would do like 12 hours a day of poker, and maybe I played 6 or 8 hours, and then the rest I was be studying, playing, watching videos, whatever. So yeah, the variance. I mean, not to say that the variance didn't last for long because I was playing so much, but I don't know. I just didn't care, and it's funny because like when you first start, and sometimes it happens nowadays too, but like it's hard to know. Like whenever you like lose 10 buy-ins in 2 or 3 sessions, and it was variance, you still feel like you play bad. And when you're first starting, you cannot separate. Like you cannot realize, oh, I just got cooler a million times. What can I do? And you just feel, oh, I think I punted. Like look at this. Oh, and then you look at all the hands, and you're like, well, all the big pots are coolers, but your state of mind feels like you were like just calling badly in spots. So separating that is hard. But I don't know. The passion of the game was bigger than whatever else it threw at me, at least at the start, and probably I ran well too, because like all of the people that are probably here in the podcast run well at the beginning. I think that's just a given. Like it's not, if not, it will take much longer. It's just what it is.
Yeah, it's very interesting. For example, when I started to play poker, I remember I went to like a local type of like pop type of tournament. I believe there were like 100 runners, and I shipped it. I don't know how, because it was super bad, but it meant like you need Like if you just straight away go in the worst downswing of your life in like the first 10K hands you
Yes.
play, you're like, this poker thing just sucks. Like, I don't want to play anymore. So indeed,
Yeah, of
it's quite
course.
interesting. In the beginning, you need to have like at least some neutral variants, but preferably positive variants in order for you
Oh,
to
for sure.
actually enjoy this game. Because no one will enjoy just getting cooled all the time. Be like, this game sucks.
No, for sure. Like you need to feel like first, like, but it's like the dopamine. Like you need to feel, oh, look, I'm making so much money with this game. And in 1 week, I made like I don't know, whatever, and then maybe you lose it, and it's just experience. But like at least you get the feeling of of really winning and smashing everyone. That's what the feeling that keeps you.
Adam, it sounds like Mateo straight away from the get-go wasn't, despite the swings weren't there, he didn't give it too much attention, it sounds like. He was very process focused. He was just focused on the love for the game, even though the outcome was maybe not the way he wanted in the short term. It didn't really destroy the love that he had for the game. And like I said, he was just focused on the process. How does one cultivate a mindset like that, especially if it doesn't come natural?
Well, like Mateo said, like he also ran good. So I think winning when you're first new to something is going to make it feel more enjoyable. But over time, it's like learning to enjoy the skill of playing and the strategy side of the game more than the outcome itself. And as Mateo mentioned, it's really hard to separate those in your first year. When you're losing, you feel like you're the worst player in the world. When you're winning, you feel like an absolute genius. And like you're so linked to your internal state, how you feel is linked to that external result. So it's all well and good going, oh, it's be process driven. Don't focus on the outcomes. But your first few years of poker, you live the roller coaster of the ups and downs. So yeah, I think obviously we all want to run good in the short term, but I think it's understanding that over the long term, how you show up, the process is going to take you somewhere, but it's going to take a bit of repetition to realize, okay, the external outcomes I'm getting aren't matching the efforts I'm putting in on a daily basis. And how do I kind of separate those two? So how can I go, right, the external results are over there. My kind of process, how I show up is here. How do I focus more of my attention on that? So yeah, I think it's some players can do it more naturally and they're more confident in their ability to do that. Other players have a lot of self-doubt when results aren't going their way. Even if they've got a big sample, some players will struggle with self-doubt when they have like a bad week or a bad period of time, and they'll use the external results to validate, am I playing well, am I not? So yes, it's an ongoing thing, but I think it's definitely something you can cultivate by just doubling down on the process over and over.
It's also like what you want out of it. If you need, or you really play it because you want to win money, for example, that's, I think, when it really becomes a trouble, right? Because you're not getting what you want. Where it sounds like Mateo, what he wanted out of it, well, that was what poker was giving him, adrenaline, cool games, something to focus on, despite the swings. The swings were part of it. And I remember I used to have like a guy that I studied with a lot, I shared an office with, and the thing that he hated the most was a break-even session. He said, listen, there needs to be something happening. Like, I want to win or lose. I want to feel something. So if you have kind of the mindset, like even a losing session kind of gives you what you want in a weird way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think break you in. That's funny. Yeah, I think yeah, it's what Adam said at the beginning. Also, I just enjoyed playing very much. I just did like it was something like competing and like thinking through a hand, and like I remember I was playing 888, the Zoom snap format, and I had the strategy that was like in a 3-up pot when I call in position, like small one versus button, and I was a button. I would just call everything versus flop c-bet, and if they check, all in, like that turn jumper. That was my strategy. And it worked. And now you can see, well, it's not that bad of a strategy at like 50 and 25 now. And doing that, I remember I was just like looking in constantly ways to, try, because my theory knowledge was like slim to none. So I was just like all the time like thinking about like brain solving, like, oh, what can I do? I kind of knew ranges, but that was about it. So I think, yeah, that the strategic aspect of the game is what like was really really enticing and exciting to like learn a game. I always been like that. I think every time I play the game with my friends and I got my ass handed to me, like, I don't know, we used to play Mortal Kombat, or we used to play when I was very small, like, Age of Empire, whatever like online game or like video game I used to play, and I got smacked. I always go running to Google and say, how do you play this shit? Like, and I would like get into videos, play people playing like really well, and I would like read all the guides. I don't know. I just had too much energy trying to become better and also compete and beat my Tampa's friends. So that's what like I think started everything. I think. I don't know.
That's that Michael Jordan competitive spirit coming out. I've got a friend like that who always wants to beat you at everything. Someone's like, why are you trying so hard to beat me at every single game we play? But yeah, I like it. It's one of those things where competition itself is there's so many positives of it as long as it's for the right reasons to better yourself to win the game, because life's just one big game that we're all playing and we choose which ones that are important. But at the end of the day, we can compete at a good level at a lot of things if we want to. So yeah, I'm really curious to dive into your story and kind of start from scratch in terms of you getting into poker. So I want to jump back into the pandemic on a world level. You're getting into poker. Everything in the world's going to shit for a while. No one knows what's going on. But online poker is going really well. At least it looks like, these games I can play from my laptop in my bedroom. Talk us through like those initial stages of loading up an account, getting started with poker. Outside your bedroom's going wild. But tell me through the initial stage of starting your poker journey.
Yeah, well, like I said, I just got into like poker like online, started playing like 2 weeks ago before the pandemic, like deposited, I know, $300 in one site, and I started playing. And once everything shuts off, I'm like, well, I should give this a try, a serious try. And I think if it wasn't for the pandemic, I probably still would have continued to go to the casino, and that would be very detrimental to my growth. So I think this was the best thing that could ever happen to me. Also, the games were like, and also I have much more free time, nothing to do, like you said. So it was all the conditions set to like go all in on poker. And I also, I got into a few study groups in Discord. I found the 2+2, which were like mostly American. So I started talking about hands every day, like finish the session, review hands with some people, or like, comment on other people's hands. And, I started all of that process, and like, I really enjoyed it. And it was like a super like up and down road. My bankroll management was terrible. I was just, so that first year was really, in terms of that, I was lucky to be, I don't know how you say, I was lucky to end up in the way that it did, because it could have gone a lot worse. But I learned a lot, and I think I was kind of decent about, like, I always had like a notebook or some stuff where I would just write down notes about, like, I have to focus on this stuff. Like, I have to, like, I don't know, meditate before every session. I have to stop calling on the river, idiot, stop calling. And I don't know. Whatever thing I was I thought I was doing like super bad, I would just try and correct. And it's so hard to correct like some patterns. But I was trying, and I was like trying to be honest with myself, look at my game. Okay, why did you lose so much this session? Well, what did you do bad? Like, write about, I don't know. So it was like that. And I think, to be honest, I think you have to go through the phase of like being really into poker and spending a lot of time into it. I don't think you can like achieve success if you don't go through that phase. Maybe you can, but I think, all the people I know that made it were really good, really went for that phase at one point. And the pandemic is just the ideal setup for that to happen, right?
Yeah, the conditions were rigged in your favor for that. But yeah, I agree. I think most players who make it in poker have an obsessive phase. And it's out of that just like curiosity for the game, like this interest that I just want to solve problems, and I can't stop myself from wanting to play and wanting to study and learn about the game. And that often sets you up for the future as well. So you mentioned like for you, you were learning lessons, and it sounds like you're being very intentional, taking notes and writing stuff down. Were there any big breakthroughs you had in your first year that really kind of set you up for that second year? Like kind of lessons that were like, that they were fundamental to my growth?
There was a lot. I think I went broke. I mean, broke. I had to redeposit my online because my online bankroll went busto like twice. But it was like what, maybe $300, $600 bankrolls. But I didn't have much more money at the time, right? So yeah. And the last time I think that I deposited, I decided I would not deposit anymore, and that time I never went busto. And stuff I learned, I don't know. I had like this guy that coached me for like 1 month or 2 months. But he was really good, and he got me into solvers. So the first year I was already like he showed me, and that's what the mathematical or aspect, because the guy was like a computer scientist guy, whatever, uh, and he was already also playing, and he offered me like a CFP deal, and then I don't know, or then some staking beer or whatever. But it didn't last long because I think then the guy lost some money and had to do something. But like, I don't remember it well. But it really helped me because his coaching sessions, he introduced me to a solver, and like the typical stuff that you see like when you're using a solver, right? Like, oh, it's if I don't let it check raise, it's just donking the next trade. Why is that? So I got a little bit my hands on that, and he used to give me the sims, because back in the day there was no GG Wizard. Yeah, the sims were like really taxing on your computer, and I have a shitty ass laptop. So I think that guy helped me. And then also meeting people, I think, like getting into an environment where you're talking hands every day, and that way you find some really smart people you can talk poker about. I think that was really helpful. I don't know. I think that's yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like the first year a bit chaotic, learning things on the fly, and then you meet this coach around the second year or the end of the first year, and he steers in the right direction with solvers. And it sounds like for you that kind of opened up your mind to what was possible. So I'm curious to know like what kind of games you were playing at this stage, and then what were your kind of initial goals? I know when you first get into poker, it's often like, this is really fun, I'm making some money, and then as you're going through the kind of transitions, you're like, wait a second, like what can I actually do with this game? Where can I get to? So in this phase, what were you kind of thinking mindset-wise in terms of what your objectives were in poker?
I think I don't remember well, but I think I first started playing. Yeah, first I played like no 10, no limit 10, and quickly I like playing Zoom because I was like impatient or whatever. I didn't like playing rectangles. I had like a small screen, so you couldn't open a lot of them. So two table in Zoom was way easier. Um, so I started playing like I think Zoom on 888, and then I moved to 50 Zoom. But I wasn't good enough to beat that. But I ran well at the beginning, and I remember like having like going like from $300 to 1K, and I telling my friends, and they were like, "Wow, man, we draw that, like like, buy something with that." And I was like, "No, man, this is like the tool to make more money." But like I remember that, and it was funny, but then of course I ended up losing it. So it was a while, and then I decided to play proper, like a little bit more conservative bankroll, and I started playing on GG on 25 NL, and yeah, but as soon as I got to like 100 NL or whatever, or maybe 200, which was like down the first year, like I think the end of the first year of 2020, I was ready to shot take to 200 NL with a decent sized bankroll. I think I just realized that in Argentina, at least back then, when the dollar and like the currency was so low compared to the dollar, like I quickly realized, and this I remember, that like there's a threshold, especially being like a single person in your 20s with no responsibilities like tied to you. You have no kids, you have no family, you have like very little responsibility. The margin utility, like the margin of how much does your life improve by winning more money, what extra things you can afford, is just super, super low. And what I mean by this is like if you play 200 NL, 500 NL, 1K NL, or 100 NL, even in Argentina, your lifestyle probably can be the same. Maybe, yeah, of course, you can save much more money or less money. So once I realized that, or like assumed that, I just didn't care about, like, I knew my lifestyle wasn't going to change because the country is very cheap. So I just focused on winning money in order to play higher, in order to like compete with stronger players. And I had that very clear. I didn't really care about the money, just because after a certain stake, it just doesn't matter anymore for me. And it felt that way from the beginning. I think since I was running to, because of the competitive stuff, I really wanted to, and it's gonna sound stupid, but I saw the best players, like I don't know, Linus. I was like, well, I would like to someday sit with this guy and try and beat him. That was my goal from the beginning. Of course, it will come a time where you realize where your ceiling is, just like what happened with basketball maybe, but like, you don't have to be delirious and gift your bankroll to Linus or whatever. But like I think that's what my like initial goal. Like I didn't really care about much about making money. Just enough to live. Okay, I guess.
Yeah, that's very interesting because I think a lot of players would get to that point and think about it very differently. So you mentioned you got a 200 NL after say a year, and your lifestyle wouldn't change by playing higher. A lot of people might get conservative around this time, going, "Oh, like these things are good. Like don't mess things up. Like this is a good point where we've done well." Whereas you like use that as kind of a leverage to go, right, lifestyles kind of tick that box. That doesn't need to worry about that anymore. And then you say pushed on, and it sounds like your competitive drive started to kick in here. You're looking at Linus and go, right, let's take this guy down. This is you like your quest to get better. So talk us through like how that impacted you in terms of how you progressed from there. So you hit 200L, things are looking good bankroll wise. Talk us through like how you went racing through the stakes from that point.
I don't know if I went racing. I think that maybe the first year was the one when I climbed more stakes. But yeah, and I think I started. I remember. I think at the beginning of the year, I put a lot of my roll into Bitcoin for some reason because I have to withdraw. I don't know why I did that, and all of a sudden it went down. So I'm like, fuck this! I cannot deposit now in a site, right? Because now I'm gonna lose this whatever percentage. I have to wait till it comes back up. Stupid, of course, stupid thought process. But then 3 weeks I started to like study 10 hours a day, and I really got more into solvers, and I really started going more into the technical side of the game. So it kind of helped me somehow to like become more like theoretical, or like study a little bit more of the theory, which I was like not doing the best job so far, at least for a 200 reg. But I was luckily equipped with the tools via watching, like getting into the right content, maybe getting into like the right Discord groups, at least at the time, to like with people that were smart enough to like share good knowledge and give you tools to improve. So I started doing that. I actually also remember that 1 week before the pandemic, one guy that I made at the casino just sold me some courses of a guy, and for super cheap. I was like, well, you have like $3 or like whatever. So now maybe it was more because I'm thinking about it. But yeah, maybe it was like $20, and he sold me a whole package of courses, and I used them in the pandemic because what do you study? Oh, let's do this, and it was really helpful, and it was so cheap. The ROI was so high. But yeah, I think in the second year, I basically my whole approach changed. My bankroll management got a little bit nichier, just because I had to focus on other stuff. I think looking at how you do each session. So in that regard, what you said kind of changed. Just because I had been a little bit too degen to that point, so I decided it was time to change that, and then I was like, it was good that I did that, because going into like the higher you play, the more like you don't want to like swing percentage of your net worth, I think. And so, but yeah, so I started studying, like having more better study routines, knowing a little bit how, like what is it that you want to study, and I believe I was super, and I mean some people might not believe this, but like I was super theory, like I was like a clanty, like I was like, okay, this board you have to use this sizing or this sizing. I was playing like many sizings on many boards, and you have to like don't get exploited. Well, it doesn't matter what they do, just play your strategy. So I was like really focused on theory and like on my game. Like that didn't really matter what everyone else was doing. That was at first, and then I sort of like evolved maybe from that. But at the beginning, I was like super into that kind of like thing, game.
Yeah, it's clear that you rose up very quickly. I know you didn't think you've raced through the levels, that you're playing every day. It feels like a slow journey when you're living and breathing it. But you mentioned in the questionnaire we sent you that most people playing in the post-solver era rise up relatively quickly these days. And I'm curious to know why you feel that is the case. Why do people who start poker in the kind of post-solver era, why do you feel like they've got a little bit of an edge in terms of their speed of learning? Obviously, we can use the tools, but why do you feel like it's been so effective for you to rise quicker than other players?
Well, I think, I don't know, it's just a common trend that I see, like people, I think it's because like the resources are more face up. Like if you want to get better, you just go there. right? So it just makes it more uneven in terms of like the people that really want it will get there, and the people. So the already natural bias of how stuff works it gets increased. The level playing field just gets even more tilted towards the people that really want to become better. Whereas before, maybe the people that really wanted did not have such a clear path towards making it. So now they get something surpassed by the Lackbox that, had 6 months, the first 6 months of his career, never-ending win streak. And then after that, he decided, okay, might as well study. So I think with the information being out there and with what you have to do, at least when you start, like the amount of information that is out there nowadays is just insane. So I mean, you do have to select some stuff, and it's not that easy, but I think the information available makes it so that if you want to do it and you want to spend the time, it's right there. You just have to like put in the time and the effort. Maybe back then you have to be a little bit more lucky, surround yourself, but like the appropriate people. There's maybe in order to improve before you had some more variance, right? I think now that's not the case.
Yeah, it was very interesting the way you said that the players who want to get ahead now can get ahead quicker because the path is more clear and the tools and the direction of what you need to do is a bit more in front of you, so to speak, whereas in the past it was a bit more hidden out of sight. So it allows players like yourself who are very dedicated. There's almost like no obstacle. It's like, okay, how much work can I put into to get better? Why do you feel like the players who are already ahead of you, let's say some players might have 10-year experience when you're just starting out, why do you feel like they can't stay ahead of these new guys like yourself who are coming through quick? Because they've got the same tools, they've got the same access. Why do you feel like the young guns are coming up quick?
I don't know if the old pros cannot stay ahead. I think some, and I think the 10-year-old long time playing guys have a, how do you say, like an advantage over the new generation that it's important to recognize, like you are to the disadvantage in a certain point because their mental game is probably 10 times better. They've seen whatever shit you've seen, they see 10 shit of that. So I mean, you have to be careful into thinking that, but I think at least I can see it being sort of easy to if you're playing the game for 10 years or more, to lose a little bit the passion or the like willingness to get up and like study 3 hours about like be blind whatever spot. And I think it's it's only logical because the game is so like intense on your everything, right? So I think it's kind of easy to lose a little bit of or like getting more into like not a competitive, like I want to improve, or get into a mindset of like I just want to be good enough to sit at this table with the rec and just win, which is of course perfectly respectable, but of course that mindset will not lead you to become 100% the best. It may be the best in terms of ROI of your time because you spend X time just polishing your game enough so you can do well, but yeah, I think it's only logical. If you've been at this game for 10 years, you probably just want to like make the maximum amount of money with the least amount of effort and just focus on other stuff like family, or it's just logical. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like that when you're on the climb, the hunger is always higher. And then when you're at the certain level, maintenance, you got less motivation than it is to kind of climb to that new level. You see it in sports all the time, like a sport like boxing. It's much easier to be the champion rather than to stay the champion. It's only like the real goats who can kind of stay the champ. And even then, they often lose to an up-and-comer who's just so hungry, wants it more. So yeah, I think that's obviously an advantage. And as you mentioned, the experience of the players who've just seen it all before works in their favor. So they've got like kind of, yeah, I think it's really interesting to see the kind of battles that go on in terms of players who are more established and players who are just trying to make their way, and like those coming together, the hunger of the younger guys and the established experience of the kind of the old guards.
I hope you guys are enjoying this episode. Quick reminder that we have opened up new spots for our Mechanics of Poker coaching program. If you want to improve as a player, move up the stakes, and make more money, me and Adam have got you covered. As in our program, we give clear directions on what you need to work on, how to study and improve your game, the mistakes that are holding you back, and much more. We cover all areas needed in order to excel as a professional poker player, making our program the most comprehensive poker coaching program on the market. Get access to our program, join our community, and interact with me and Adam and other like-minded individuals in our monthly group coaching calls, and have your game reviewed in one-on-one coaching sessions. Apply now over at mechanicsofpoker.com or use the link in the description down below. And maybe you will get the chance to work with me and Adam and have us help you make more progress in your poker career.
So you mentioned last year was one of the worst downswings of your life. I want you to relive it for us and talk us through what happened last year. How bad was the downswing? Talk us through how that impacted you.
Well, yeah, I think, oh, was it last year? Yeah, well, it was a lot of stuff, a lot of things actually. First, I just moved to live by myself. I used to live with my mom, and I would have moved there earlier, but like we had some shit going on, so I prefer to stay with her. But when I finally did, that was the beginning of the downswing. So that's always, whenever your living costs increase a little bit, and I wasn't gonna feel the pressure because still it's cheap, but you start spending twice as money every month. I started like running a little bit bad, so that's when it started. And yeah, it was a big downswing in terms of like how big of a percentage of my net worth I lost. It was over half, and it was across multiple stakes. So it was like the good old, you drop down and then you still run bad and you drop down again. So I was at the time I was playing like maybe up to 2K and all. And I had taken a whole month off because I wanted to study for my finals, the last batch of finals of my career, and then I also had to move. So it was like I completely took time off poker playing at least. You always like maybe review a hand or two, but yeah. So when I came back, I decided to take it slow, and I was like, okay, I'll just play 1K for the first couple of sessions, just so I don't lose a lot of money. And of course, first session play only 1K, and then I lost like insane amount of binds. And yeah, from that point onwards, I just started. Maybe it was like I think it's like usually like that on big downswings like that. First, you're doing some stuff wrongly, and when you correct that, then you start running bad. So the reinforcement, like it just feels like nothing works. But like you're just, at first it was your fault, now it's the Barion's fault, and at the end, that's what happened. So maybe I was like, my tele selection was complete garbage at the beginning. I was playing a lot of like maybe heads up or like battles at the highest stake. Then I took a hit and then decided to go like, okay, let's play lower or let's play more conservative. And then I ran back. So it was like the, compound aspect of that. And I took some time off. I think I took like 3 weeks off to dealing with some other stuff too. And then, but yeah, and in the end, I'm kind of grateful anyways for that, because it taught me a lot. And I don't mean this like, I really mean it. I think it's just like something you have to go through in order to improve aspects of your game. In that case, maybe mine was mental. Some mental stuff was bad. So it forced me to improve. So I think it was a tough year, I think, because I think overall I lost money. Or like, well, maybe won very little because of like the expenses, but like I think it really taught me a thing or two. So yeah, I think everyone goes through something like that in their careers. I think it's very hard not to have something like that happen. And what I thought right away is like, well, maybe thanks God this happens when I was playing maybe like, I don't know, 2K now, but maybe when I was playing 5K or 10K, because if I had to play that high to realize I was doing some stuff wrong and then lose much more money, that would have been way worse at least. So I don't know. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
But of course it's tough.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you've almost got to go through. You've got to experience it to to kind of learn the lessons from that. I think it was really important what you said as well, like the kind of compounding effect of a downswing. It normally starts either you're playing bad or variance, but then they start interfering with each other. I think often the most common way is variance kicks in first, then you start playing bad, then variance on top, and then you can't just play through that with a sample size, because now your game's like deteriorating week by week. You're starting to get affected by results. Maybe you're not pulling triggers on rivers. Maybe you got a bit of emotion going to your sessions. You're not paying as much attention as you normally would. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, that was a variance downswing to begin with. Now I'm just playing some bad poker as well. So you mentioned from a mindset perspective, I'm sure like during this downswing you were wrestling with loads of ideas and am I good enough and the self-doubt. Talk us through like the main mental lessons you learned from this in terms of being able to get through this. Because I always feel like if you're able to overcome adversity, there's a massive lesson packed in that, which sets you up for future challenges. So I wonder for you, like what was the big kind of lesson you learned through dealing with downswing, coming out the other side of it?
Well, first of all, like it just humbles you a lot. You just drop the ego a little because you're forced to. Like, you're not someone who plays XT. You're just some guy, right? Because now, so first you get humbled. You realize, well, I was being a moron in this regard, playing these people. I think, I think that's one of the main things. It teaches you a little bit, like, be more strategic about your life. And if you don't feel like swinging X amount of money, just play maybe for this month, play in this way, right? And then it doesn't mean you have to play like that forever. A good advice I once heard, like I remember, I don't know if it was like where, but like it was like it was from you, WAKO. I remember you said something like, when you're like just losing every day, don't be afraid to book a win, even though it's not ideal in terms of like, because if you have a good session in the morning and you usually play 2 sessions, why wouldn't you play one at the afternoon? You kind of think like that. I would like, it's like a fish mentality. But when you just lose 15 days in a row, like maybe seeing one green number on your tracker is kind of good. So if you like maybe get to like see 2 or 3 green numbers in a row, or at least next to each other, you will build some momentum in terms. So like sometimes taking the minus EV or like the not of like, thinking like a fish and like playing only one session because the first one you won. But when you're in special circumstances, like being permissive and like and with yourself of doing that, right? I think that's something that, and especially it depends on the player profile, because some people, if they get on downswings, they just play very, very infrequently. So it just, of course, depends on how your approach is. If you have an easy time playing, then playing less sometimes is good, right? So I think it depends, but like, I think that was good advice, and I actually do that nowadays, and I feel no shame in that anymore. Whereas before I would just look at myself from outside. I would be like, this doesn't even make sense. And then you go into the second session and lose whatever perfectly normal barriers. So you would like deep down you're like, I'm a fucking more, and you ended in this loop of stuff that doesn't even make sense. But like, so I think taking it slow and just coming slowly back up is a good advice. And I think also a friend I remember told me when I had this big downswing, he told me, we are gonna make it. He said, like, it doesn't matter if we make it in 1 year or 2. This is just like whatever times it takes to recover. Like, I think you are gonna make it, and I think you think the same of me, and whatever. So it doesn't matter. The time doesn't matter. It's just like a detail, and then that just makes you think in terms of like, it's like seeing your whole graph of your entire life. Like, well, I think this guy is right. I think given how quickly how much time I put into the game, how much quickly I rise, it's just a matter of time. It just doesn't matter. This just doesn't matter in the long run. So that was also good advice, I think. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a really, really powerful one. I'm glad you shared that, because I think often we get so attached to the short-term narrative of what's happening. But if we can zoom out and go, right, I'm going to make it. I'm going to get the results I want. It might take a bit longer than I would like it to, but I'm okay with that. I think often when it comes from somebody else as well who knows you and can see the work you're putting in, it allows you to see like a zoomed out perspective and go, wait a second, like what's happening now? I probably won't even know or care about it. Maybe I'll speak about it on a podcast with TheWakko and Adam, but other than that, it won't be a significant part of my life because I'll get past that phase. I also feel as well, like when you're going through a hard period, just remind yourself of the story it's going to be at the end of it. It's one of those things like we're all on like our hero's journey. When it gets really shit, it's like, oh, this is going to be a great chapter of the book. This is going to be so good. When I get to the side of this one, this is going to be a nice story to tell. But I think for you, obviously, you maintained a lot of confidence through this patch as well. I'm sure there was times of doubt. I'm curious to know for you, how do you maintain your confidence when things aren't going well? Like, how do you continue to show up? It seems like for you, you're continue putting the work in, trying to learn, trying to solve the problems. How do you maintain that confidence that you can solve these problems and you can get to the side of it?
To be honest, I don't really know if you maintain the confidence. I think you just go forward and hope everything works out in the end. I think if people tell you I always believe them, I think it's bullshit. I think you just, especially when you're someone so inexperienced like me, who, it's not that you have like 2 million winning stuff. Every time you go up in the stake, you're new in the stake, and you don't really know if you're a winner. So for me, I think the reality is like I think I'm gonna make it. So let's just go on. Hopefully, we'll turn around. I will study as hard as I can. I asked a few friends, hey, do you think I'm retired? Like, am I really bad? Like, so I tried to fix. I looked into my game obsessively. What am I doing wrong? What am I doing right? What should I work on? Like, I just tried everything, and I trust in the end it will work. It would work. I don't know. I think there's nothing more that you can do than that. I think I didn't really think, because I honestly, deep down, you don't know if it's gonna work out, but you just like it's like life. You just go with it and like hope. Yeah, what can you do?
Yeah, the uncertainty is always there, right? We never get the certain this is going to work out. I know it is. But I think for you, like as you mentioned there, what you did is you just kept moving forward. You just kept putting in the work. And I feel like confidence is often the belief that I can show up in the way I say I'm going to, and the actions that I'm putting in over time will get me the results I want. And in moments, you can feel like self-doubt, but still act with confidence, like still act as if like a confident person would by taking actions. I think that's like kind of a missing piece, because like I said, it's not like you're waking up every day going, I know it's going to work out, but at the same time you're putting in the work and you go, right, I trust that over a long enough sample size, if I keep showing up and banging my head against the door, that it's going to. And I think this is like building evidence with action. I think this is where some players go a bit astray when they want to have confidence without putting the work in. And it's so hard. Like, it's so hard to fake confidence. Like, you can do it for a little bit, but if you're not putting the work in, you're not. You know the competition is. So I think for you, like, one of your things was, well, it feels like you're a hard worker. So I'm curious to know where you got your work ethic from. Has this been I know your basketball background definitely impacted that, but have you been someone who's always been able to apply themselves quite well? And do you feel like, how do you feel like you are able to put a lot of work into what you do?
I don't think I would say that, but I am someone that applies myself well. I think if anything, I'm the opposite. I'm really messy and stuff. But I think in the stuff I'm interested in, which for example was basketball at the beginning, I would really, really like. I just, like if for example I used to be shit in the basketball, like shooting. Sorry, shooting. I was really bad at shooting, right? Because I was like fast and stuff, but like my outside shot was very bad going up. So I just went to take infinite shots, and I like read online what should I do, and I tried it, and then I also saw the result. I got way better. I still wasn't a super good shooter, but I got decent. So once you see the feedback loop, which in most stuff is like really delayed, like you go to practice shots for 3 months, and after that time you improve a little bit. Same with poker. You study a spot, like it's not gonna, like you just won't win instantaneously more money. So it was always like that, I think, and I worked really hard, and I was really hard on myself too. And I think I could have worked harder, for example, in basketball when I was growing up or stuff. I think I would have done much work and probably would have been better. I do think there's like a limit in terms of like you have some talent and you cannot like achieve more than everyone has a ceiling, but of course that ceiling it could move, depends on how hard you work. And I kind of regret, I think I could have worked a little bit harder on my basketball. So I decided also, like, if you get a second chance on anything, like for example now poker, just don't leave anything on the table. So I think that was a good teaching teaching moment from basketball, for example. I still work really hard, but I could have done more, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a mindset as well, which is really powerful. Like when someone works hard like yourself, you almost think like, I don't work hard because I could work harder. You mentioned like I did an infinite amount of shots to get my shot better. That's like a dedication that most people wouldn't do. This go, right, well, I suck at this. I'm not gonna put that much work in to get better. But you realize like putting reps in, doing repetition could get you better at stuff. And then when you got to poker, you're like, all right, well, I can get better by just putting more and more kind of work to master my craft over time. Now, you did mention there that there's a ceiling that people have. I think you did mention the questionnaire that you think you need talents to succeed in poker. So I'm curious to know for you, what talents or characteristics do you feel are needed to succeed in poker? And where do you think ceilings for players exist who do not possess those traits?
I was thinking more in terms of basketball when I said it, but I think it sort of applies to most stuff. What talents? I think it's very broad, and I think that's something really funny because when you play maybe lower stakes, there's a lot of people playing weird strategies and stuff. But since you're playing low stakes, I don't know them. Like maybe they are just bad. But when you get to like higher stakes and people been playing for a long time, you still see people with weird strategies or stuff like, what is this guy doing? But they win, and you learn. First of all, you learn to respect them, which at the beginning, it's very important. You just learn to be like, okay, this guy is doing some weird stuff, but maybe he has a reason, and you realize maybe this guy sucks at this spot, but in this other spot he has like, so maybe some guys have really intuitive talent in terms of like they can really sniff off some bluffing spots, some big pots, and they just don't care about the tiny, like they're not as accurate in like small pots, but they just have like they just sniff out bluffs more often in big pots, and that 5% difference in terms of like the bluff catching in a big pot just compensates and more for maybe whatever they use the wrong sizing or 3 pot. Who cares? So I think there's a lot of talents that go with poker. Some people are just like very good at having strategy and executing it, no matter like whatever the weather, the how many binds they lost, whatever. They just can go play 2 hours the same strategy. Just not, they're like a zen master, And those people like they just feel like they are unbreakable. So I think there's a lot of different talents, and of course the one that has the more amount of those, of course, is going to be better or harder to play against. But I think. I think there's many talents. I would say, of course, the eagerness to learn or like that is also like important. But I think there's countless of those. Some people just get the theory stuff much quicker. Some people have a natural like intuitive, exploitative like thought process that they are right really often, but they don't know why. I remember I had a friend who used to play, and if you ask him about a hand, he would tell me, I don't know, I just thought, I don't know. He would not be able to explain anything about his game, but he just crashed, and he just had probably good instincts, and and he just did so well. But you could not talk a poker hand about him. It's just like you could only talk about, he used his sizing, I thought he was bullshit. But that's like whatever the max you could get from him. But he just somehow, like, I think it was the like perfect example of unconscious competence, that. And I think, so I think there's many talents, many stuff that works.
Yeah, I had a friend like that as well who was a bit of a genius with intuition, but you couldn't extract that knowledge from him because you just couldn't relay it back to you. Very frustrating because you're like, are you withholding information from me just so I can't get it from you?
He would be like the worst coach ever.
Yeah.
And somehow, it was like the worst coach, but like, it's just
it works for him.
For people,
works for him, can't be replicated. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you mentioned like there's a lot of talents you can have, and I agree there's like a wide range of skills. For you personally, what do you feel like are some of your talents or traits that you've developed that have allowed you to have success in poker?
That's a tough question. I don't know. I feel one thing I do have, and this, like, I have a super good memory. Like, I can remember hands I played like 2 years ago. Of course, not exactly, but like, I don't know, a break came on the turn. It was a 3 or a 4, I don't remember. But like, I have very good memory. If I played a hand versus you last month, I probably have it somewhere in my mind. So when I'm playing, I kind of like have all that stuff in mind. So I if I saw a sizing from you, and those stuff I think helped me, especially coming up, but still do now. Uh, and if I end up a session, I like talking hands a lot. I don't know, some people are like just end the session and like, well, let's just talk about something else. Fuck it. I've been 2 hours like with my brain, and I want to like talk all the time about poker, or about, especially if it's a poker friend. But yeah, I think my memory really helps me like remember like small stuff and from hands, or like maybe from things I study. And then I don't think I do well. I don't know. Maybe I'm very analytical or very logical in the way, and maybe that helps. I don't know.
Yeah, that memory definitely sounds like a bit of a superpower to remember hands from long periods of time ago. Even if it's like just a data point in your head, I'm sure like you pick up little signals in pots where other players might have missed it because you've got that kind of sample size already kind of stored there. I'm curious to know now about your ability to focus. I think you mentioned earlier that you did some 12-hour sessions early in your career. I'm curious to know how you stay focused during long sessions, and what do you do when your distractions arise? How do you keep yourself feeling sharp?
I don't know really. I'm not. Maybe I'm not a great example. I usually play with some sort of music in the background, which I probably think is not ideal. But it just helps me. I don't know. I just always been like that. But yeah, I don't think I'm the best example of that. But I just, I, I don't know. I'm very focused on trying to like have a game plan for most situations. So I'm thinking about that, and if I see something that makes me want to alter it, uh, yeah, I try to like keep that in mind. So I kind of have a lot of stuff in mind when playing. So making sure that information is available and ready, maybe it's what keeps me focused. But other than that, I don't really know.
That's focus in a nutshell for me. I think if you want to think what
Yeah,
is it's like the
yeah, I don't
ability to
know.
keep your attention on what's important and what matters for as long as you can. So for you, it sounds like because you've got a clear game plan and you're checking in with that game plan, you're also paying a lot of attention to opponents. Your mind's just it's fixated on what you're doing, so the attention is just fully focused. So when I ask you what you're doing, you're like, I'm just playing poker and thinking, like I'm just focused, I'm locked in. So yeah, it feels like one of those things that probably comes more natural to you than other players, because some players may struggle to keep their attention on their game strategy, and the mind might drift a bit more frequently. So for you, I'm wondering about how you respond to pressure. And you've rose up the stakes fairly quickly, and I'm guessing you're playing opponents who maybe you looked up to not long ago, and you're in games with them. How do you respond when you're playing maybe, let's say, an opponent who you respect, who's a very good player? How does that impact you in any way? Do you feel any sort of pressure, or do you feel like your strategy changes, or did it in the past?
Well, it's sort of like a process you go through, because the first time you start going up stakes, what everyone tells you, you're like, wow, these guys will have bluff on every spot. You have to start calling down because now people are really good. They will have bluffs on this spot that nobody has bluffs. So at the first time, you always like it happens this thing where you over respect people and then realize, well, they have leaks as well. And you start like it's sort of like a middle ground that you find. In terms of pressure, like I always enjoyed playing basketball growing up. You get you suffer, like you go through a lot of pressure from the coach that tells you to do that, and look, maybe the game is tied. So that that was probably good for me in terms of like, and I always enjoyed it. I thought, and I also like saw the good players, and I saw, well, these guys do really well in during pressure, so I just try and do the same thing. Not that I did, but I tried. And in terms of poker, like when you play someone that's really good, of course you get the uneasy feeling of like whatever you do is gonna outplay. Like I cannot do like whatever I do, everything feels indifferent. You get that feeling at first, but I think you just, I mean, of course, if he's at the table, you probably try to avoid the good players if you can, because like if they think you think they are better than you already lost the battle, right? So you shouldn't like play there at all. But if you have to play because there's like a good spot, or like a recreational, I mean, you just try to play the best you can. You just have strategy, play the best you can do, and like whatever he's better, he's gonna probably beat you in some spot. Hopefully, so you can get some of that back by beating him in some spot you studied better. And if not, then it is life. Then you beat, like, it's a chain of command. Like, maybe you can beat someone else and he beats you. What are you going to do? You hopefully can get up the next morning and improve. So somehow he beats you less, and then hopefully then he takes the vacation and you surpass him. What can you really do? I think, like, given you can select who you play, and you kind of maybe the better players, you can only play them when you have no shot. Then no other chance, because then that's fine. Also, you can enjoy it as a competition. Like, maybe you play someone that you feel like you're like from break even to slightly losing, but it's not that much. You can play it to like push yourself, but of course you have to keep in mind that you're basically losing money there and time. So yeah, I think this is balance between that.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you enjoy the competition element of playing tough opponents? Because I think some players might get intimidated by going to high levels to play players. You see players who like play the same level for like many years. They've got a good win rate. It's like that level above, they just how create a mental barrier of everyone's so good there, and they just create some sort of narrative that stops them. I think for you, like, obviously your competitive background, it feels like you're kind of used to that situation. You're used to, okay, these guys are good, cool, let's dive in, let's play them, let's learn. And yeah, that when you're in let's say you've moved up stakes many times, let's say you move to a new level and the level feels pretty hard to begin with, you're playing some of these really good opponents. How are you problem solving? All right, I'm slightly behind these guys right now, but I'm going to catch up. How's your mind kind of battling with that? Because some people will overwhelm themselves and go, right, these guys are better, I'll move back down. But if you say for you, the speed you've moved up, you must have been overcoming these obstacles pretty frequently. So I'm curious to know what your approach was.
Well, thankfully, I think given that we are humans, you can usually see someone making a mistake, even they're really good. So you can chew on that and feel like, ha, look what he did. He's human. Fuck him, right? I can maybe beat him. Of course, they're a little bit delusional, but I think you kind of have to be a little bit overconfident and be a little, I mean, has to be a little small, tiny, small amount of overconfidence in yourself, just to like believe you're maybe a little bit better than you are, but not delusional because you're gonna be broke, or humble back to the limit 500. But like, you have to have that extra thing where you sit down and maybe over time you just continue to study, and then you get more adapted to the meta game, to the higher stake order, and then you can get more even, I think. And yeah, of course, seeing someone else do a mistake really helps. And I think some players, and I think what ends up happening is after moving up and seeing players that you saw in the YouTube clips of them playing in Poker Stars, and the chips sound after the chip sound of millions of thousands of dollars, you realize some players are not that good, and then you realize some players are really good. But so at least or at least so. It's very subjective though, because like when you play, the sample is so low that you sometimes, if you play the same pool, you ask someone else and you think, oh, this guy's really good, and you think, well, he's done this against me. So it's also always very subjective. But in the end, I think first of all, like, after playing and seeing some mistake, you can at least lie to yourself and say, oh, look, he made a mistake, he's beatable. Just a little small lies to keep you going. And of course, sometimes you find someone that like really does not make a mistake, or like somehow it's making all the right exploits versus you, and then you probably treat with care. But at least you realize it's not the bulk or the majority of the players.
You mentioned you gain confidence from seeing other players make mistakes, especially good players. This opens my mind to think, what happens on the opposite end of the spectrum when you make mistakes? How do you process them yourself when you're in tough lineups and you've made a mistake? How do you generally handle that in those uncertain moments?
Well, that's a good question. I remember there was this podcast not long ago about with the iPoker, where you guys were talking about being hard on yourself, and I remember thinking that, and that's what I think I have to. I worked a lot in that myself, because the mentality required to like in sports, it's a given. Like, everyone teaches you, like, Kobe Bryant used to be really hard on himself when he made a mistake. Like, everyone tells you that. But I think in poker, you have to be more have to be more relaxed, like, more calm with that. And I think that the destroy the opponent mentality that sports cultivates us, it's okay because it's a physical sport, and if you get angry, whatever, you probably get much more power, your muscles work. But since it's 100% mental game, like, I don't know, in chess, I don't see, if you want to really beat your opponent, you cannot like really get angry and play better, because it's a mental game. You cannot, like, your arm will not be stronger if you get angry. Maybe in sport it sort of works that way. Sports are still mental though, but like there's such a big physical component that sort of like works. But in poker, it's not, and actually it's the opposite. If you get angry or like slightly angry, you're gonna play way worse. So I think translating that, fire into fuel, but different kind of fuel, because you're fueling your brain, not your legs or stuff, has been really important for me, because it's like manifesting the competition or the willing to destroy someone else or try in a different way. And I think that's been really important. So, and I think being hard on yourself is another example of that. Like, I think maybe in sports, I think it's ultimately bad, and there are many books and information about that. But like, at least, but it's very common in sports. And I think going to a more like permissive and like loving talk with oneself is much better. And it's still something I work on, and it's too ingrained in myself about many years in my childhood of like missing a shot and being like, "You dumbass, what are you doing?" Right? Or like doing some wrong decision. But yeah.
How have you been able to channel that aggression into a different fuel source? You mentioned like for sport, like it kind of has some positives, especially the physical body, but with the mind, it's often needs to be, it's like redirected in a way and use a different fuel. And you mentioned like you use it as a different fuel source. I'm curious to know for you, like how that plays out. So you've got this aggressive tendency. You mentioned like Michael Jordan's your role model because he's got this kind of fiery nature to him. Now you're playing poker and you've got this kind of aggression in you, this wanting to kind of kill the opposition, but you realize, oh, wait a second, I need to use this differently.
Yeah.
So how are you directing that differently at the poker tables?
I mean, you have to try and think more strategically. I think Michael Jordan made a pretty bad gambler. I would say probably made a really bad poker player. I don't know, but that's what I heard. So yeah, in terms of that, I think you can take the aspect of like wanting to like be better than your opponents, but you have to reframe it. And yeah, I'm thinking more strategically. If I see someone do something wrong, first of all, it's hard to if you start watching for other people's mistakes. First of all, you forgo your own, which are more important. Second of all, you get this constant feeling of entitlement because you feel like, oh, this guy's making these mistakes and he's beating me. And in poker, like, even though you play someone make more mistakes than you, he's gonna beat you a lot of them. He's gonna win. You cannot win 100% of hands versus nobody, even if they don't know the rules. So, getting comfortable with that situation of like maybe playing someone you believe is slightly worse than you and him getting the best of you, even if it's by luck or even if he outplay you, he will he can exploit you once. You can call in a spot you think he's bluffing too much, and then it turns out he was going through your value. So getting like comfortable with that, and trying to channel your willing to be better than the other person in terms of strategy. Like, be practical, like, okay, I see this, how can I use this information to refine my strategy? So be more like strategic, more like, I don't know, practical, not just like, oh, I'm gonna just sit with him and just win by just being next to him because he's just so bad. That doesn't work like that. And yeah, I think I remember another podcast of you guys. It was like with Yumad Bro, and he was saying, like, think how will the EV flow towards you in the table? Like, how okay, you're sitting at a table, you think you're winning. How are you winning? Like, are you winning by the not just sit because I think I'm better. Like visualize that EV coming to you and how it's coming, and then dance it. And I think that's really powerful advice and very interesting. And I remember listening to it and really having an effect on me. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that, channeling that energy in a different way, and it's almost like more strategic, more patience, and not getting caught up in like the short-term flows and ebbs and flows of being competitive and trying to win against the competition. So for you, like, do you have any? Actually, I'm curious to know, like, throughout your career, let's go back as your journey. your experience with emotions, like the emotional side of it. All right, so we've talked a lot about logic, we've talked a lot about frame and stuff, but at the same time, like the body often responds quite viscerally to the poker experience, and we can experience the ups and downs. So we're trying to think strategically. We're trying to use our long-term framing, but we're experiencing like frustrations and emotions. So for you, yeah, I want to know which emotions you've experienced throughout your career and which ones have you had a battle with.
I learned that you kind of, there's no, like when you start working on mental game, maybe reading like Jared Tendler or whatever book, doing those stuff, you realize that there's no escaping emotion, and you just have to like minimize the impact they have on you, or don't let them like take over you. I mean, there's no shutting them down, and actually that would be even bad, I think, to not have emotion, like try to shut them down, because I think they are useful in some poker spots. Because like if you see the other guy slightly tilting, you can recognize by, I don't know how, like maybe he's playing too fast, like after a big pot you lose. So I think if you're not connected to your emotions, you would miss some stuff about other people that you really don't want to miss. So I think it's not about shutting them off, but rather than acknowledge them, have them go through you, and hopefully leave no scar, or like leave nothing in you that can change your game, which is really hard. And maybe you get like tilted, but if you get tilted for 30 seconds, it's gonna be fine, right? Maybe unless you're in 4 big pots at the same time, then that will happen very frequently. Usually we're just upholding pre-flow while you're like tilted about the last hand, and then if you 30 seconds after that you're good to go, or like 90%, then that's fine. So that goes back to being like permissive with yourself, and like realizing you're not never gonna be a machine, right? So I think that's how I try and deal with emotions. And yeah, and I think they are important in terms of like, and also for playing versus like, for example, recreationals, trying to understand them. I think it's something you never want to shut down.
Yeah, I like all the things you said there, especially around like acknowledging emotions are a part of being human, and you need to learn to experience them. I like the letting the emotion pass through fully and fully experiencing it, but also like trying to take back control in that state. I think often an emotion can carry you away. Let's say you're frustrated. It's very easy to act out of frustration rather than going, oh, I feel frustrated right now. This is going to pass through me, but also not allowing yourself to get like too far off center or off the track of your strategy. Sounds like for you, you've kind of allowed yourself to experience a full range of emotions, and it hasn't taken too much of a hold on you. Have you had any experiences?
It probably has before, but I also think it's like knowing your biases is good as well. Like knowing whenever you're slightly off your best game, you tend to have these biases. So now it's become a battle between yourself, where you're like taking a decision and you know your bias, and you kind of can guess you're in certain state, and in certain state you have that bias. So now you have more information to make a better informed decision, right? If your bias is to become needy once you lost a lot of big pots, at least if you're aware and about that, you can correct that a little bit, or the other way around. So I think knowing how you tend to behave in terms of stress or of emotional stress also helps you in terms of like having those emotions not affect you as much, because they're affecting you at the time, but you also know they are. So you're just trying to wrestle into like the most objective decision possible, which is really hard, of course, but yeah.
I love this. This is at a high level. I really like the angles you've taken on explaining this, because that's exactly how I see it. Like an emotion creates a tendency or a bias that leads to an action, but it happens quite predictably in a way that you can spot it, observe it, and then modify your behavior because you know it's going to come. Myself and Rene were just talking before this podcast actually about how players sometimes struggle to change a bias. You can spot a bias, go, would I feel frustrated over calling this spot? But even with information, some people struggle to change that. It sounds like for you, when you know a bias is there, when you can spot it, you're able to modify your behavior. Do you feel like that's something that you're quite good at, or something that you've had to work on?
I had to work a lot on that. I remember there was this book which is called Body Mind Mastery by Dan Millman that I read when I was quite younger, I think, and I had to reread. But one of the stuff that it teaches is a short book. It was like I think Olympic gymnast, or maybe I'm wrong, but like he basically said, when you're trying to correct something that you're doing wrong in any sport, you usually have to go the other side. So, you know what I mean? Like if you're, I don't know, you're just hitting a baseball with too much strength, you have to like overcompensate at first, because so you have that by sowing great. So if you saw someone that, you know, calls a lot on the river, sometimes it's okay to, like, the first month you're trying to work on that, overfold. It's just only natural. You cannot correct your biases by like aiming to be just in the middle, just where you want to be. No, yeah, you will overcompensate, and that's fine. And getting comfortable with that also, from that they mentioned in that book, I think it's also helpful. And
Yeah, love that. Yeah, I think it's very true. When you're too far one way, you often need to swing far the other way before you find that equilibrium. It's really hard to like just modify slightly back into that little midpoint. And also think you've got to experience what it feels like to be on the opposite side. Let's say you're always folding a spot, then you get used to always calling. Like that extreme difference, all of a sudden you get the pain points of that. And you're like, wait a second, I call, but not that spot. And it kind of that course correction, and over time you kind of modify to the middle, but you've got to experience that, especially when you're very extreme one way. All right, so I'm going to pass you over to Rene. I've got like loads of so many new questions come up every time you say something, so I could definitely go down a few different rabbit holes. Rene, I know you've got a lot of questions yourself, so I'll let you dive back in.
Yeah, I mean, so much things to dive into. I want to straight away hook into what you mentioned about bias, because I find it such an interesting topic. Obviously, for that, you need to be self-aware and always be on the lookout for your own game and tendencies. I think in the beginning you said, and I know you a little bit as well. Of course, we've done some strategy. In the beginning, you said, I would, for example, tell myself stop calling, right? Because it's probably a bad bias of yours, or at least a bad tendency in the past. So I was wondering, how did you overcome that? Like, what did you consciously do to override this bias? Like I said, you talked about like in-game actually taking account for it. So most probably, if you think the spot is probably close, it's probably a fold. If you have a bias towards calling and vice versa.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like I remember, like, when I mentioned that, I was thinking, like, yeah, I remember writing in my notebook. I used to have a lot of notebooks, and I also, like, this past year I started journaling. I just heard like, yeah, this guy, I don't know who it was, but like some top guy, he's journal. So fuck it, I'll journal. I'll try it anyways. I kind of like it because you can put your thoughts into writing and you just digest them and you just feel liberated after. But I mean, I think it works for like everything. There's a lot of different stuff that works for everyone. But I remember writing that I had the feeling that I was like maybe versus recreationals in spots. They all, they tongue potfully, and I wasn't being disciplined enough to make the folds that you like. Come on, you just know. It was like you're tilted, they got there, and you call anyways. So I had that problem when I was starting, so I just wrote it down. But I think, thinking about the later stages of my career, I think trying to, like, when sometimes you take a decision out loud and you got, okay, I'm gonna fold, and then your hand clicks call, and or vice versa. All right, I'm not gonna bluff, and then you bluff. Why? So trying to see what was going on right in that moment, which is really hard because there's a lot of emotions, stuff going on through your head when you're playing 4 tables or 6 tables, but trying to think, what was that made me do that? How did I feel at the time? And analyze that feeling and seeing, okay, so the root for this problem or stuff that I'm doing that is this, and find some way to inject some logic, like Jared said, like find some logical way to counter to deal with that. So, for example, if you're bluffing a river that you don't know if it's like, I don't know, if you see a big amount of money in the middle and you say, well, I could bluff for, a small percentage of the pot and I could win all this in the middle. If you remember that your bluff is going to be between, I don't know, 0 EB to like -5 big blinds to 5 big blinds, even though a lot of the times you're going to win what's in the middle, which is maybe, I don't know, 100 blinds, you're just winning with that click. You're just winning or losing 5 blinds. So it's not that, so like, and that's a perfect logical statement. If you go to the solver, you see DB, oh, it's 5 big one. But in games, sometimes that is not like what you're thinking. So I think correcting in terms of like thinking, okay, maybe you're doing an action thinking, oh, it would be really nice to win a pod right now. But if you think about TB, your action is just barely, it's just like the low amount of VB. So if you think about it, I'm going to click for like 1.5 big blinds, best case, then I think that helps you deal with some of your tendencies, I think.
I think it reduces like the weight of the emotions. So then it makes it a bit easier to make a rational decision. The process that I think you're describing is like, I think Jared calls it the mental hand history, where you kind of go through your thought process and think about, okay, why did it make sense that I do that? What was my thought and what is the flaw? If you start to understand the flaw and you start to incorporate a better way of thinking, if you start to understand the mental flaw in your decision-making process, then you can counter it. And then in-game, it's indeed very important to start recognizing, okay, this is the state, or this is the emotions that I experience leading up to the mistake that I commonly make, right? So if you then can start to recognize these emotions and try to replace them, or at least, recognize them and be like, hey, wait, this is exactly the way I feel before I do this stupid thing that I always do. Then at least,
or like you can just combat the emotion. Like, I wish to do this, but like the logic indicates this is bad because of this. So that you, at least you just have an argument to the logic and emotion that you previously just had, but unconsciously. So yeah, I think that it is sort of like that. I think that's one way, but there are many ways. I think being true to honest with yourself, I think it's a very big part of poker, and I think it's something that is maybe not talked about enough, or like maybe not. I think poker is a journey of like you discover a lot of stuff about yourself, and some stuff are not pleasant maybe, but you just forces you to put yourself in the mirror, and the easiest, the less resistive, smoothest path, is to be real with yourself and don't bullshit yourself and saying, look, here you're punting because of this, so you have to fix this, and instead of thinking, no, but I was doing because no, he's over. So I think that's a very important skill in poker, and I think and it's hard because you have to look yourself in the mirror and realize you're probably bad or like have a leak, and accept that, and I don't think it's that easy for many people, including myself.
You talked about moving on from mistakes or from like certain emotions. Do you do like something consciously to move on? For example, do you give yourself 30 seconds to tilt? Or for example, something that really works for me, if I've made a mistake or I'm uncertain about a spot or I'm a bit tilted about a spot, what for me personally really helps, when I press mark the hand, is like I marked it, so I gave it a place. It's for the next session. I put it away.
Yeah,
if I don't
it doesn't matter
mark
anymore.
it, I feel like,
Okay.
I might want to look it up, or I keep ruminating on the spot. But if I mark it, it's gone. Like I know I'm gonna look afterwards. Right now, I'm just gonna focus on the next hand. Do you have like something like that you do?
No, not really. I think maybe no, I don't. If I mark it, I could still be reminiscing. I'm not that disciplined. I don't know. Maybe I send the hand to someone and have their like quick opinion if they are online. But other than that, I just. But I like in the later stages of my career, I just punted so hard that like I'm kind of cool with it. Like, oh, okay, punted. What are you gonna do? It is what it is. Not the first time, not the last time. So I kind of like, it's and when you're playing aggressively or exploitatively or whatever, you will be wrong. You will punt, and it's I don't know. Maybe it's still like a force of habit. Like, oh, well, I made a call that probably is dumb. Let's try not to make it again, right? I don't know. It's just like being used to punting, basically. I think.
Yeah, that's kind of the acceptance, right? That I think we talked about indeed in the episode that you referred to with the eye poker. Kind of like more the acceptance, and also I think he mentioned it as well, and I think I heard it before, and I don't recall which podcast. That like understanding that these mistakes or these punts, they're part of your win rate, right? Like you have, let's say you have a positive win rate, and these punts that you make, they're part of your win rate. Obviously, would be great to start to do them less frequently, but when they happen, it's like, yeah, okay, it's part of it.
Well, I remember once it was like maybe 1 or 2 months where I was like, yeah, doing. I concluded it was a while ago, but I concluded that I was looking at my stats. I'm like, it's pretty reasonable, not folding too much, not being aggressive enough. Like my stats were kind of very good, or at least okay enough. But my win rate, maybe I had like a long break even stretch, winning one big, and and I was like, what's going on with my game? It was a significant sample to be concerned, and what was like what the last thing that I had to check was like, well, maybe I'm punting on big pots, right? Because maybe my percentage of fold on the river is good, but I'm making the wrong decisions. Maybe I'm stationing on spots that people don't have enough bluff. So I tried to focus on the big pots, and every time I would make a big punt, I would just write it in an Excel. So punt, what stake, this stake, how much, like being objectively, how much, because of course you call 80 big ones in the river, you don't lose 80 because sometimes the guy has a stroke and he was bluffing. But like if that happens 1% of the time, well, you have to calculate DB roughly, right? So I would make like an Excel of punts and see at the end of the month how much I punted in punts. So after you see whatever amount of dollars and like subtract it, like add it to your win rate, you see how much it. So that was kind of helpful too, and it was fun, and it was like forced me to be more diligent. So that was a fun exercise I did for a while, and kind of helped me. And a friend told me to do it, so that's a good one. And it's also fun because you just like write the Excel of shame after the session. You're like, well, okay, punt, pre-flop, you call it. Yeah. So that one was helpful as well. And when you see it all add up.
And I think also it helps to make it visual. And I think when you analyze a spot and you're trying to estimate the EV, probably you also come to the conclusion, because like in poker, there's just some spots that your return of investment is not, how do I say this, equally divided in terms of best case scenario.
No,
Let's say
I agree.
Let's just find all the bluffs that you fought in game. You make 2 BB, but there's a scenario where he misses all of them.
You lose 80.
You lose 80. So it's like, okay, so in best case scenario, when all my assumptions are wrong, right, I make 5 BB. And when he's like completely on the opposite side, I lose minus 80. So probably you started to recognize some of these spots like, hey, the return of investment is very unfair. I should probably not be investing in these scenarios.
For sure, I think that's exactly how, if you think about this like a normal distribution, sure, sometimes if you're right, that's completely like exactly, and I use that logic to talk to friends, or if I ever had a student or whatever, like, what's the best case to worst case scenario? And the problem is, sometimes it's exactly what you said. I agree 100%, and that probably this typing out the mistake thing or the punt probably help in that regard as well, for sure.
Yeah, especially if you have a problem with bluff catching. If for your bluff catch to be correct, you have to literally give him all the bluffs and he has to bluff them always, and then you are at a plus V scenario. Most likely not a great call. Okay, let's
or like with the bluff of yourself. Like sometimes you're bluffing into a range that maybe it's gonna be hard for it to fold enough, or you're just being too wishful that the guy still has some combos that he can fold, and maybe he folded earlier. Now there's still a lot of stuff of room to make punts. So I think it's being honest with that assessment is really important, or it really helps at least.
I wanted to touch on something that you said earlier, which I think was a big game changer in your career. You said that you moved away from plenty thinking, which I think with that you mean like very theoretical oriented. If I think about, or at least from what I saw on Plenty when he used to make a run at once video, the RNG was spinning and doing everything at a balanced frequency, etc. What made you move away from this type of thinking, and what did you replace it with, and how did that impact your game?
Well, it was a couple of things. First, I was first started in it was like a Zenith poker. So I was like in that Discord. That's where I first started, and that school or whatever, that academy, whatever, whatever they were. It was super theoretical, but to an autistic. But like there were a lot of brilliant people on that server. They were like mathematicians and scientists, whatever. It was a little bit too excessively, theoretical, but it helped me a lot in understanding some stuff. And I think I'm grateful I started that path. but I ended up too theoretical, not very practical, but exploiting. I think I was missing that street poker thing a little bit that you old guys probably have, because and then so that comes from like actually trusting your gut and stuff. So I was too ingrained in that stuff, and then after climbing to 500 and having like a very like at first an upswing, but then I think I had like 180k hands of being break even. So two things happened. I think I got into a Spanish coach, and like Spanish coaches and Spanish people are always known by their exploited, that they are not very theory oriented. They don't care about it. And I remember I only had 5 lessons with the guy, but he was, I mean, they were about playing versus recreationals, and he started like doing some stuff, and I was like, what the fuck? It was like so sick, like making huge pots with maybe not that great of hands. I don't know, but playing like really insane. Like he would say like, okay, I'm gonna flat Jack 10 offsuit on the bottom when the fish opens because, or like because the huge whale is on the big one. I'm like, what? So a lot of stuff, and I could tell that the guy in terms of theory didn't know much, but he opened my mind in terms of exploited poker. So that was one thing that I started to realize where the EV comes from. Well, it's from the recreationals, and I'm not maximizing my win rate versus them. I'm just like thinking that by showing up, I'm playing proper ranges, I'm gonna win, which it is true, but you're not maximizing, which is terrible, right? And I do think also that when you and I think this is just a theory, but I kind of see it live too, that whenever you pound on a recreational, like you ISO him a lot, 3-betting a lot, like you just go for him, it gets personal, and he just gives you action in return. Whereas if you like are the guy that just plays like tight versus him and just has always good hands, he will deep down know. I mean, at least most recreationals. But I think if you tell him, you just like do a little bit of like one BBC bet or like check min. Like sometimes you throw in a couple of stuff like that, you end up like building a tilt on him, and he just passes. Like he wants to give you action more, and I think that's really important. Imagine someone that you ISO to 9 big blinds and he calls twice as often than versus another one. You're just printing money, and just by attacking him more. Of course, you have to be careful who you have behind. But yeah, that was one thing. And I think also I did watch your course on like the first one, the first edition. And it was like, I remember a part where it was like, how does your EB, where does your EB come from in terms of the game? And it was like a very good teaching moment, because it was like how to translate what the solver tells you, how to apply it into studying it in order to exploit. Because like a lot of the solver is I mean the solver is balanced, and for this and that reason why everything is the same EV, like why checking or betting is the same EV. But if you think about what's going to happen later, maybe it's not the same EV versus humans, or maybe versus one person is something is more EV, and versus the other player there's it's not. So trying to find why the solver does what it does. Is that happening in real life? Yes, no. Is that happening more, right? So that helps you build a more deeply thought out exploitative thing, because it's not like if someone overflows to a c-bet, you just c-bet more. That's just very level 1 exploiting. But if you like start opening more, because you get to that node more, maybe you open smaller because now he defends a wider range, and now he like you pummel on that leak from all the angles that you can, right? And there's like a million more stuff you can do, not just like the level 1 exploit. And then yeah, I think that was like a good teaching moment about how to, because I was like starting with solvers in a way of like learn strategy. I learned a couple of stuff from the solver and try to implement that best I can. Now it was more like a conversation with the solver, like see what he does, why does it well, learn what's going on, try to come up with a recipe of my own in game, then check and then be open to being wrong. And I think that's where I became much more of an exploitative player, and that was a very big change in my game, the biggest maybe, and it was right around that first year, the middle of the first year, where that happened. And I think those two things were like the biggest thing. I just went from becoming like very like I'll just play GTO and just win somehow, to like, you know, grabbing the ball, like taking action and like going for it, and yeah.
It's interesting because like obviously there's like many camps, right, in poker, especially if you look at the extremes. You have the extremes, you have the Clantis, the GTOs, then you have like the full MDA strategy guys, you have the guys who only exploit on a HUD. What you kind of mentioned is you obviously did understand theory, but it sounded like you started to use a solver more creatively. I remember also in the beginning you mentioned, if the solver cannot check raise, it solves it by donking. And it sounds like you started to get a way more curious approach to the solver and to what type of strategies you can implement. How did you then find the correct balance between still applying certain theoretical concepts, but still be on the lookout to exploit? Because I can imagine a lot of people usually struggle with that, right? They're, I don't know, I'm going to go full exploit now, or no, I'm going to go full theory. Where is the balance?
Well, I think that's why I'm grateful in the path that I took, because by being first on the solver camp or whatever, or like at least going through that phase, it prevented me from going full monkey or like full exploitative in terms of, because I there is a limit, or like it's good to keep in mind some stuff about the theory on how spots works, and then you can adjust it. Like if you feel your opponent's capped to certain hand, that just means you can like the theory that the adjusted theory would be you can go all in 10 times the pot with that hand +1. So then I think that the best course of action, and what I see from most high stakes players is like they try to cook up a strategy where like it's not exactly a theory, it's like the theory adjusted to what they think you're doing, and then they could be wrong what you're doing, but like they usually right. So I think that's the challenge. But I think being like knowing a little bit of both worlds helped me in terms of not becoming too extreme. And I think that's also something I like. I've been in many, like I've seen a lot of points of view of people of poker. Like I've seen more moderate people that just play their game and exploit on the rough sides, the Spanish people, or like usually the old Spanish crew that goes like super exploitative. But then there's the new Spanish people that are very solver oriented and still exploit. So there's a lot of like different approaches. Like someone I really like is Yuri Pelik, for example. His videos are really good, and he's also really interesting exploits, and he thinks really well about the game. So I think trying to understand, or like trying to get interiorized with all the different schools thinking process, and create like some thinking process of my own, I think was very important. I would like to. I read some of the blogs in Russian, like the Russian forums, which translated some, for example, Stefan or like some other guys, and that also like I don't know enough, of course, about, but I think the Russians are also have their own like school or whatever, and sometimes it's very weird. You see them do weird stuff, but there are lots of very successful Russians, and I think Russians as a nationality is historically very tough very competitive. Like if you look at chess and stuff, they're tough people, smart people. So I think there's always something to learn about everyone, and I think also I will like being open, like even if you see someone do and it's something even more. It's more reason to learn from someone, because when you go up and see another reg doing like a lot of mistakes, and you look at him and like, how long is he playing? 6 years. He's been winning. He's winning at high stakes for 6 years, and you just saw 3 mistakes in one session. What probably that means, like my old self would be like, this guy sucks. He's running so good. My new self, or like what I try to aim, or I think it's better to do, is like, he's probably doing something really well that offsets all the puns that he just made. So maybe I can learn from that for what it is. And I think a lot of players, for example, they're just so good at playing versus recreationals, or maybe adapting versus other regulars, and that they just like do a lot of theory punts, and it just doesn't matter. And like just focusing on like, well, if someone is winning at a higher level, then they're probably doing something right, and focusing on, well, what are they doing right, instead of only focusing on what they are doing wrong. I think that's good.
Very valuable lessons indeed. I think that's something that you learn when you put your ego on the side, right, over your career, and you start to look at, instead of in the beginning you're like, oh, these people are so bad, blah, blah. But then it's an evolution that you make as a poker player. I was wondering, you mentioned, I think it was the jump to 2K, I don't know, you mentioned something in your conversation with Adam that you said you were doing some things wrong when moving up, and you kind of got beaten down. Do you recall what it was about your game that you had to change in order to establish yourself at those stakes, at the higher stakes?
Well, I think my game was not solid enough to the game selection. Like I was choosing to play. Basically, I was just basically not good enough for who I was playing or how I was playing. I would play like maybe sessions with a lot of heads up and maybe too many tables versus players that were really sharp. And yeah, you just have to be really good to do that. And I was not. So then reality check. That's basically what happened. I'm not gonna be like, that's just basically what happened. I'm not gonna be beating around the bush. And then I try to change that a little bit. Game select, not play everyone. Play only the guys that you think you have something on them. Maybe you could be wrong, but at least you're like decided to not play a lot of tables if you're battling. Small. I think my game was not good enough to like, I had not the best mental game, or like because game selection is sort of like a mental game, I think. So I was not good enough. My technical game was not good enough for how poor I selected some seeds. So I think that's what usually happens. And then also you realize that even if you're like, I remember I ran it once, very old video from Sauce, very smart person, very great mind. And he was saying like, a 1BB edge is basically pointless to grind, because the variance is going to be so big that whenever like you're going to change, like if I'm playing someone heads up and I just winning one big line, for the first 180k hands, the luckiest one will win. And the luckiest one could be someone that wins like 60 binds. At that point, he's going to be playing way better poker than me, so my 1BB edge would be banished, and I'm probably even losing. So basically, small edges with all the variance that comes from the game are not worth it, especially at higher stakes where like there's a lot of money in the line and it's hard to win the money back at lower stakes. So I think that really resonated with me and made a lot of sense. And yeah, I think that's really important to take into account. Like, and at one point you have to be realistic with yourself, and also just how much edge can you possibly have, and if you just play anyways, at least accept that you're doing out of flop for the game. Maybe you're not going to be making most amount of money, and that's fine, but just accepting it. And then if you hit a big downswing, then like, well, it could happen. It was something which within the realms of possibility that you were counting on happening because of, and then maybe you have to adjust and lay low for a while or not, but like be more real. Like, yeah, exactly. I think that's the takeaway, I think.
What makes these regulars at the higher stakes so hard to play against? Like, what separates, in your opinion, like the best sort of from the rest? And also, I think you mentioned earlier, it's cool, it's okay to challenge yourself, but don't give your bankroll to Linus. What sets the better players apart, and what are signs that you need to look for to realize that you're outclassed and maybe you should leave the game?
It is hard, I think, and maybe this is like an answer that has no purpose, or like you're going to be like, what do I do with this answer? But I think I think you also get a feeling when you're playing either a heads up battle or a three-handed reg battle. You kind of feel when you're just where you kind of just where you're just getting smashed. You feel it, like you just feel like you're clueless. I think especially after a lot of amount of hands, whenever like you're bluffing, you get, I don't know, there's something in the way that in how you feel in the moment, that you feel that you're, and that the other way around also happens, and it has not, and I think after a lot of hands or hours played, you can separate like the variance. It's not because sometimes you're getting smashed just because you're getting cooler, but you can separate, like whenever in every small pot, he's always a hustle, always like whenever you check bet, he raises, and you have always above, all of those stuff. I think you kind of feel whenever you don't have an edge, or when I think when you realize someone is better than you, when like you just mark 10 hands from the guy that you were like, well, I think this was weird, and then you check it and they were all like the correct place, and you didn't know about it at the time, and you marked it as, well, maybe he just knows more than you, right? So I think it's a mixture of how you feel, then reviewing hands, them being always right or much more right than you, and then you realize, well, maybe I'm outclassed.
Yeah, I think especially I can definitely relate to what you say about how you feel. I would say almost how in control you feel, referring back to also what you Matt bro said, especially in battles. I think it's very important that you know where the EV comes from. So for example, I'm a big fan of when you go in that you kind of have an understanding of, okay, I'm going to play this battle. I know where the EV comes from. And then if you sit down and the game starts and you indeed see that the money is flowing to you in the spots that you were expecting the money to flow to you because you know their mistakes, that's when you feel like you're in control and you're kind of directing the match. Whereas at some other matches, you're just like, wait, I feel no control whatsoever. I'm just reacting to whatever these guys throw at me. And I don't know, I don't feel in control. And then for me, like the feeling of in control is a sign like, I don't know what's going on here. So chances are they're just way ahead of me.
And I think that's where like the styles come into place, because and I think, yeah, like some players have a style which is like make the game messy, and this applies to sports too as well. Like if you make the game messy and you are like very structured, then you can probably beat someone. Like there's like I don't know, like the Pokemons that like fire beats water. Well, it was the other way around, but you know what I mean. Like some styles clash, and I think a lot of like interviews, like maybe Aurora, the Russian guy, the blonde one, or like that, a lot of people said, well, like maybe rec battles are not just about skill and about matchup and styles, and some matchups are favored for a certain type of player, and that's just the way it is. And every strategy game has like this class of whatever is better than this. So I think that also comes into play, and sometimes you're just helped, like the guy that makes the game messy might make some mistakes, but maybe he uses to a lot of spots where you're uncertain of what you do, and maybe that there's uncertainty causes you to play and focus. Because if you're getting into, you used to play like 80% of the spots, you know what you do, but now the guy opens to 3.5, and that's weird shit. All of a sudden you're facing a decision that you have to like rethink or brain solve in the moment over half the time, and maybe that stresses you to the point you can't execute. Then the guy maybe is worse than you, but just puts you in an arena that you're not as comfortable as him, and he just beats you, and that's also what can happen.
Yeah, it triggers a lot of uncertainty, which is definitely like an A game killer, right? You're being taken out of your flow. You start to doubt things that you maybe normally didn't doubt. We've teamed up with some partners in the poker industry that we believe will help boost your win rate. First one being Universal Poker. If you are playing online poker without a good rakeback deal, you are leaving money at the tables. This is where our partnership with Universal comes in. Whether you are making a new account or want to boost your existing account, Universal can give you the best deals on the market. But what sets Universal apart in today's market is carefully selecting the sites that they want to work with, only collaborating with sites that have their shit together and offer clear lines of communication to the ones up top. This line of communication makes them more like personal assistants for players rather than just an affiliate, which in my opinion adds a very big boost to the deal. So go over to universalpoker.com, link in the description. Be sure to enter code MECHANICS to access the exclusive deals that we've arranged for our listeners. Next up is GTO Wizard. If you're a frequent listener of the pod, you know that at least 90% of our guests get ahead in the game by using solvers. And GTO Wizard is by far the most accessible tool if you want to use GTO to get ahead as well.
We are proud to announce a technological breakthrough. Introducing GTO Wizard AI. This powerful technology can solve any custom poker spot in seconds to high accuracy. Unlike pre-solved solutions, this allows you to edit the solving parameters. That means you can modify the ranges, change the stack and pot sizes, customize the betting tree, and automatically simplify and optimize your bet sizes. Brace yourself. The meta is about to change.
So sign up to GTO Wizard using the link below, gtowizard.com/mechanics. Get 10% off of your first month description and join the weekly coaching webinars, in which one every month is with me. Looking forward to educating you guys over there. You mentioned about you realize that we're doing something wrong. You also mentioned looking at your stats and be like, hey, okay, it looks like I'm playing well. How do you go about improving as a player in terms of identifying leaks and then fix them?
Well, I mean, yeah, look at my stats. If I see something wrong, like I'm check folding too much or wait, something like that, which I had a lot of those coming up, and sometimes I still do. Yeah, I just try to review hands of that spot, or maybe drill a little bit of that spot. But usually, I just try to, I just review hands. Occasionally, like the newer spots that I've been studying, like I do some study the spot as a whole, like try a lot of boards, see what happens with the strategy, see what the range versus range interaction looks like. I have a great I love studying the game. I think it's really enjoyable for me. It's not I love playing and I love studying. I don't have a problem. So I really like complex strategies, and that kind of reflects a lot in my game, I think, because I like limping and a small blind or whatever. I think that's opens a new area of possibilities that is really fun, and I think it's a little bit more unexplored than some other stuff. It has its downsides, like everything, and its upsides, because at least I think having such a complex or broad strategy, if you're running bad, it's easier to doubt yourself. But at the same time, whenever you play people that do the same thing, like if you go to a table and everyone is limping the small, and at least you're not in uncharted territory as much as if you did, right? Like at least you're used to playing that spot as well. So that's it has its pros and cons, and I think there's a lot of successful players that do either. So I don't think one is better than the other. I just, for my personal stuff, I think I enjoy more because I just love the game and love studying it. And I think, yeah, that's just how I reflect the love of the game. I think how the strategy, the complexity gets, it's more fun, I think.
Yeah, I saw that in the questionnaire. We usually ask some questions, and you could choose between simplified strategy or using a complex arsenal of lines and sizings. You already mentioned this triggers like creativity, makes it go more enjoyable. What do you think are the ups and downside of then simplifying your strategy? And in which areas do you prefer to do it?
I think simplifying is still really good. It helps you have a simpler strategy, so you spend much less of your brain frequency, or the amount of your brain power, into recalling what's sort of the strats. And even if you want to exploit and you're thinking about how should I exploit the WAKO, you only have one direction.
Unexploitable.
Well, but you only have one direction, just a bit more often or less often, if you bet one sizing. But if you have a lot of complex stuff, and now you have to start, there's you can go in very different dimensions. So it requires more attention. Whenever you make a mistake, or you're getting pummeled, or it obviously going to trigger more doubt if you're not playing simplified, because you could be doing EV punts. So I think there's an upside. and a downside for both. When I first started coming up, and I was this like very theoretical guy, I thought you had to play a lot of sizes or like that. But after like being around and I'm seeing a lot of very successful players play really simple strategies, they just work. I think that's just not the case, and I think both are fine. And it's just like styles. Like everyone has their own style.
I think like the biggest benefit, in my opinion, from like, let's just call it having a more complex strategy, or at least more lines and sizes in your arsenal, is you can then from there adjust your frequency in a certain sizing. Let's say you play a split from the small blind. Okay, you limp and raise. The exact frequency that I would limp versus one guy or raise versus another, I can then adjust based on how he plays. Whereas if I would only play raise only and suddenly start to limp a lot versus a guy, he's like, wait, you never limp. Why do you limp versus me? Whereas if I always limp, he doesn't know the exact frequency I do it versus him. You understand?
Yeah.
So from there,
I would never do that. I will only play the GTO frequency. But yeah, I understand what you mean.
no, yeah, I get it.
I agree. And then also whatever stats you have are just reflecting your stats versus everyone in the pool. So it's kind of hard to know what the guy is doing for you. And I think, the more complex the strategy, the more, you can like hide and stuff. But also it's very taxing on your mental. So I think there are spots.
I think you haven't seen the podcast yet, but probably the people that will see this podcast have seen the podcast. We did a podcast with Chris Nguyen and Luke Braid on ACR, and he mentioned that the benefit of a simplified strategy is it gives you peace of mind. I thought that was very, very, very smart stuff. Like from there, you can just perform. Whereas indeed, if you play a more complex mixed strategy, sometimes you're like, am I now just owning myself? Sometimes you feel it's like the debate of like more complexity, more exploitability. Sometimes you feel like a genius, but also comes the other side of the coin.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it comes down to how much it will tilt you when you get exploited by your own self compared to the peace of mind. Like I would not. It's nice to have peace of mind, but I don't play for peace of mind. I think I play for blood if I can, and hopefully the other guys. If it's my own, then I'll just review and just put a band-aid and move on. So I think, but I understand, and I think there's so many successful people, and like you, for example, one guy like Muniz, I don't know, play a little bit versus him, and the guy is just like a machine. And like you kind of feel like a little bit like there's nothing I can do. Like there's no holes in the guy's game, but he also doesn't like play. He just doesn't care about it. I think he probably doesn't even know my screen. I mean, he just play. I don't know. So I think you just get that feeling versus the very good players that they just play their own strategy. They've been playing that strategy for 9 years. They just show up, execute. They are not gonna get into leveling wars very much, and they just win. And you look at the graph and just go straight up in very tough stakes versus very tough opponents. So I think. Both sides are yeah. If you look someone at like Linus, for example, he plays really complex strategy, I think. So and I think
actually what was funny, like back in the days when there was still when OTB Red Baron still reigned the tables, and together with Linus, was funny. Like if I would play against OTB, he was like the guy, like a flop would come and I could just expect anything. Like I'm not gonna predict. But Linus was, back then at least, in the other side, he would have just one stab sizing or one this. Like you would always know what to expect. So in that way, it was sort of comfortable. But ODB, I was always like, oh no, what is he going to do now? And then you would see the timeline go and he would always do exactly the thing that I didn't want him to do.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
So both, obviously, Linus was very good with his frequency, blah, blah, and his, back then at least with like a simplified but good strategy that was hard to exploit. But in one way, it was more comfortable to play against than OTB, who would every time just put me in the blender.
Yeah, and I think it just depends on what impression do you like, or do you feel is better to give your opponents. I think in that case that you mentioned, the Linus is like you get the impression that you're helpless. Like whatever you do, he's gonna be executing. You kind of exploit. Like you're like, well, he's gonna show up, play his strategy. His strategy is almost flawless. it's gonna be hard. At least I don't get put in tough spots, but you know, at the end of the day, he has such a good strategy. But on the other guy, you feel like he's really beating you. So it's two different feelings that you get, and you know, I think yes, versus some guys, some style could work best, and versus other guys, you know, that's back to the matchups things we were talking about.
Throughout this conversation, and basically all conversations that we ever had on this podcast, you always hear study, 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 study. Okay, what for you has been some of the most efficient ways to study?
It's really a tough question. I don't know, because I did so much stuff, and I think at the moment that I was when I did it, it worked, and maybe now it wouldn't, right? I really like node locking a strategy versus the solver and see how he plays against it. I think that's really useful. Yeah, I think node locking is kind of useful because you try and it's like you train to learn the reactions of the solvers, right? If this happens, like you're trying to learn the conditional, like if this happens, then the solver adjusts this ways. So after a couple of tries, you can see in the way that it will be adjusting. But this is kind of dangerous or problematic because there's a lot of stuff that is going on that you have to be careful with, right? Because the solver is adjusting on the river on the turn. So if you are looking at the flop and you're like, oh, this, you kind of get the logic of how the solver is thinking, even though it's not. But like, you kind of gets in the direction that it starts changing or adjusting. But you have to realize that he's compensating on later streets. So I think it's tough, and I think tools would probably get better as the years progress in that regard. But yeah, I think those two are good spots, and I think also Flopzilla, I think it's a very good tool, and I think all the Spanish poker crew uses a lot, and I think it's not bad to mess with that a little bit, because I think it trains your intuition very well in what's your opponent's range. Trains it in terms of like how much, what's your opponent range. That means you can probably calculate or estimate how much your hand is worth, like what's your equity of your hand. So I think that's also pretty nice to like mess with the Flopzilla a little bit.
It's interesting because obviously, you know, you can see the range as well in the solver, but because the solver already shows you the strategy, that's what you focus on. I think what Flopzilla forces you to do, it forces you to think more in terms of range interaction. And because Flopzilla doesn't show you the strategy, it forces you to think. Whereas the solver kind of feeds you the information, which is not, which then you forget about actually looking at the range, which Flopzilla, you know, is all about looking at the range.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's Flopzilla is like the OG, like the first poker software like that. I don't know if people used to study, but like I would guess people would study about, well, what's my opponent's range, like what's my range. So it, like something similar to it, at least, is what people probably used to first start to study with. So I think and I think it's a little bit of an unreplaceable stuff that you have to do, like realize how much top pair he has in some spot, or like sets into pairs. Like that's usually driver of strategies. It's this thing that like influences all. And you kind of have to have an idea.
Yeah, especially, I would say, especially at river scenarios. Let's take a river bluff catch scenario. I think that's the easiest example. You just look at the solver and say, oh yeah, my hand is a frequency call. You learn nothing. Whereas if you just get a notepad out and a calculator and be like, let's start counting combos, and be like, well, I have to be right X percentage of the time. These are the combos that he has. And then throughout that exercise, you will start to recognize spots where it's like, oh wait, it's quite easy for him to overshoot the frequency here. Or in other spots, like we discussed earlier in the pod, oh, even if I give him all his bluffs, I have a break-even call. So probably, you know, and that's what
and then
kind of me, right, with training your intuition.
Yeah, and then you go on the turn and see, well, the bluffs that got on the river were allowed to bluff every time. But then you go to the turn and you see that all of the straight draws are betting just 20% of the time. So like, well, what are the chances that this guy is only betting them 20%? So now all of a sudden the river range might not be realistic. So you have to adjust and compensate for that. Another, actually, that I forgot to say, another way I really like studying or understanding a concept very deep is like a toy game. I think it's really nice and interesting, and I think some people just, I mean, it's some people just don't give a fuck about them because it's just like not really applicable. But I think I really like them. I think it's really for understanding or explaining a concept in terms of like many spots in poker. So that's I really like messing or knowing them, and maybe showing them to a friend or whatever. And yeah, I think that's really like the theory of the game. I think I'm very very interested in, and I think it's really fabulous and very very.
I think what a toy game allows or forces you to think about the mechanics of a certain spot, whereas if you just actually look at the spot, it you kind of lean towards more just copying it. What you take away from it is different. Any toy game that stands out?
I don't know, like I've watched Apple, but like basically there's a couple, like for example, why can you just I don't remember specifically right now, but like it's explaining why maybe you split the size on the river, or how the range, how you everything in the solver works, so that as a sizing protects another sizing. I think those kinds of stuff that teaches you the stuff that you take for granted when you see a solver. Oh, of course you're using two sizes. Now, of course you have to protect. Well, but why? Why do you need your range protected, right, at a certain spot? And the reason is to prevent the other guy for, like, if your range is always like super capped, the other guy would just shove every hand that is better than yours for value. So that would allow him to like bluff a shit ton. Like if your range is only top pair only, the guy, well, top pair is really strong, but if your range is really top pair, good kicker, it's the best hand you have, and you can grab ace king, top pair, top kicker, and just shove it, and then he's gonna be able to bluff 10% more of his range. So that means that you get into a zero EV spots way more frequent. So your whole range EV drops. So once you understand that, that's why it's important to like RNG and trap the nuts some percentage of the time. If the guy's not going to do that, then you don't need to do it. So I think understanding those mechanics of fundamentals of the game is really good.
So it sounds like, basically, if I kind of summarize, I think you mentioned node locking, Flopzilla, and toy games, which all have nothing to do with just what I think most players do, which is open the solver and try to figure out, okay, what do I do in this spot? Like more like actual copying. It sounds like, or that's kind of my main takeaway from how you study. You're really trying to figure out how the game works, and you try to kind of test out different ways, and are curious and creative in game to applying various strategies, and kind of see from there, kind of build your own strategy in terms of that you think is highest EV based on everything that you now know of the solver. But it has nothing to do with copying the solver. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, at some point you have to learn like some structure, or like you have to have some of the solver strategies in mind, like the like copy it a little bit in order to just not spend like 30 seconds to see with the 3-bet pot, right? Like you want to know that some spots are range bet, some spots are you bet. Like some stuff just by heart because it's just more efficient. Like it's not that you get to play just one table. But yeah, those are the common spots, and everyone who plays and studies this amount probably kind of knows what is up. But yeah, I think it's important to know a lot of stuff, like how like messing around with the solver is really, like, if let's give it a small size, see how you react. Now give it a big size, how the River Pro situation changes after a big size, after a small size on the flop, and why. And the reason is how you play it. So a lot of stuff, understanding how a small change really impacts and the polarity and everything. So I think that's the best way to like really understand, and then you will be able to like come up with a decent strategy, your own in game.
Very good stuff. I think a lot of good takeaways for our audience here. I was wondering, when making decisions at the tables, what are for you the most important things that you take in consideration when you make a decision? What is something you think a lot of players put way too much weight upon when making a decision?
That's a good question. I think thinking about the opponent's range and tendencies is important, and then how he perceives you, and then I think, and I think people usually, I think looking at the other guy's range is something that people sometimes don't do. Like, I call because I have this or that blocker. Yeah, but what are the hands that you're bluff catching? But like, what is he bluffing under the gun versus big blind, single spot, ace, king, queen, queen, king? She's like how she's been doing pocket threes all the way. Like, I think, that like some people just, oh, I have a blocker, I'll just have to call X percentage of the time. My bluff catcher is like, I don't know, some people just sometimes focus too much on their own game and not thinking enough about the other guy's game, about the other guy's range. But I also see the other reverse, like the guys that just try and, like, if your range is capped, they will just bet small with value and big as a bluff, and just basically they're just targeting your range. So I think, yeah, there's a both sides, but I think it's important to think about the other guy's range pretty much.
I can definitely relate. It's kind of the consequence of too much solver work where we're constantly trying to think of what do I have to do, what I have to do, and you're only thinking about your range, your frequencies. Whereas, like, at some point, maybe look up from the table, look at your opponent, and be like, huh, he's never bluffing. Then the conclusion is quite simple. Sometimes we make it too complex, and then there's a discussion about the right blocker, the wrong blocker. Whereas the most important thing is like, well, is the spot close enough for this blocker to actually make the difference between a plus V or minus V call?
And I think there's something that you have to be careful even if you focus only on your strategy. Whereas, like, you can make frequency mistakes, right? It's okay. You're not gonna lose EV in theory, but the problem is like, if you make mistakes that lean towards a specific way of making a mistake, that is what the other guy can predict. I don't know if this makes sense. Then he could accidentally exploit you by his game plan. So, like, so you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if it's
maybe you can give an example.
If you there's some mistakes that in theory don't cost anything, but like if I give up a bluff that's 0 EV in a certain spot, it's that I should bluff every time, or like most of the time, it's probably I don't lose EV. But if it's a spot that people probably don't expect you to have a bluff, so you're just deviating in a way that is kind of predictable by your opponent, then you are exploiting yourself, even though you're just playing your own game, right? And you just made no EV mistake, but you actually are. So I think, yeah, it's kind of like in that example, maybe it's important to have bluffs in certain spots, because if not, and when you're playing good players and that have been around for some time, they will stop calling you down in spots if you just don't show up with bluffs. And so yeah, in that scenario, I think you have to be careful with that mindset of like, I just do at best it's a frequency mistake. Well, but if your frequency, you're deviating, and then your opponent is probably defaulting to that, then you are going to get exploited.
I think it links nicely back to what you said in the beginning, that there's some truths that you might not want to believe is true, so you come up with excuses. Well, hey, I could bluff this, could not bluff this. It's 0 EV in the solver, and you can just hide the fact that you have maybe a tendency to give up. And if you suddenly start under bluffing in a spot that's overfolded maybe by population, then it's not so 0 EV in hindsight.
Exactly.
So
you're getting accidentally exploited.
Exactly right. If you play an unbalanced strategy, that accidentally the pool does kind of the opposite very well. I was wondering, in terms of studying, what areas do you believe are most crucial for players to study? Like, where do you think most of the EV comes from?
I guess it depends in what stage of your poker journey you are, really. Yeah, I think it depends a little bit on that, right? Because
maybe our audience, maybe like a lot of, I guess, mid-stakes driving professionals?
I think just having a strategy. I think just like maximizing versus recreational is important. And then having a default strategy that you can just, when you don't know what to do, I don't know this guy, what do I do? Just having a decent strategy there, not too complicated, is a good place to start. And then go from there. And then and I think being able to adjust once you see a showdown, a stat, that after a couple of hands you played, like a couple of thousand hands you played, you can say, well, he's doing this probably wrong. So how do I exploit it? And then maybe deeper down, going into deeper exploits, like I was talking about earlier, just multi-street exploits, because and then sort of adjusting to the situation, adjusting when there's a recreational, and then having being able to also play a solid, simple strat when you don't know what to do or exploit. I think those are good starting points. Once you got that covered, maybe you can try and do something else.
Yeah, I think that's good.
And of course, the mental part.
I think that's good advice, like to actually go in having at least some sort of idea of, let's say, a defensive baseline strategy. I think where people get kind of stuck is that they don't evolve to what you're saying, that from that to kind of say what Chris said in the other episode, from that, you have a peace of mind. From that, you can start to look at all the possibilities. But what I think often goes wrong is that players stay in like this defensive baseline and they try to perfectionize their defensive baseline and never look for the further possibilities where, I think like perfectionism, I really wanted to be fully bulletproof. That's kind of, I think, where you're taking it a little bit too far. And, you should probably, like you said, look up to your opponents and look for the opportunity.
Yeah. And like 6 max is just like such a complex, and then there's a lot of spots. You cannot aim for perfection. So it's hard to have that mindset. You need to at some point go, you need to be sometimes being really decent in a lot of spots is much better than being really good at 2 spots and suck at other spots.
Yeah, but poker is not about playing everything perfect. It's about sucking a little bit less than your opponents.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not punting.
And not punting. Let's indeed not forget about that one. Adam, why do people get too perfectionistic, and what can they do to overcome perfectionism?
That's a good question. I think it's the need for certainty and the allure that they can get to a level where they can predict the outcomes. And the more you seek for certainty, the more you seek perfection, the more you seek that clarity of I'm going to get a result I want. I think the fear is if they don't play perfect, they won't win. They won't get the results they want. People will exploit them. So they take the extreme of wanting certainty and also wanting to win to an extreme. I think that perfectionism is one of those things where I think often we can class things as perfectionism when they're not. So like when someone's trying to get better and obsessing over learning, they might not necessarily be a perfectionist. It's someone who's like their standards are too high. They've almost got this the bar is I can't do anything wrong. I class that as perfectionist. But yeah, it's often that kind of the fear of making a mistake and potentially not getting the results they want, and trying to the mind trying to cling on to certainty in an uncertain world full of chaos. It's like I want predictability, but there's no predictability around, and I think that's when people can push that push perfectionism too far.
Yeah, I think throughout this conversation, Mateo has been very what I've noticed, like he embraces uncertainty a lot instead of fighting it. I think something that the perfectionists, like you said, strive towards, certainty in an uncertain world. I think Mateo so far has shown that he likes to just embrace it. And he's very realistic, right? He also said like, yeah, okay, I throw out a few punts here and there as part of the win rate, and he accepts reality. And I feel like perfectionists probably have a tendency to not accept reality and to not embrace uncertainty. Does that sound about right?
Very true. Yeah. And also like the relationship with mistakes is different because a mistake can be a learning opportunity. Whereas for a perfectionist, that's like a grading. I failed. I didn't do well enough today. So I think it's like that lighthearted nature of I'm going to mess up. I'm going to make mistakes. I accept that and I will learn from it and move on. And I think, if you push perfectionism too far, it's painful to not live up to your standards that you set for yourself. So I think Mateo's definitely not in that camp to the extremes at least. But it's something that you need to work on.
And I think also you have to accept that you have limited mental bandwidth. You're playing 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 tables at a given moment, and your attention is limited. And I don't know if it ever happened to you, but like
if you ever spend like a week or like studying a very specific spot, let's say you were studying blind be blind, c-betting, or stabbing in certain boards, I do notice that when I do that that type of in-games or depth study, like about a specific spot in the game, I play worse after because my mind is just focusing on like, oh, I want to get this spot right. Oh, the king queen board, blind be blind. Time to show what I learned, and then you stop thinking about exploits, the other guy's range, that the other guy just folds blind be blind 60%, so his range is like under the gun, and you're just like c-betting everything. So your brain logically is trying to apply and just focusing on the one thing, compared to your usual focus, which is layered and thinking about a lot of stuff. So I think it's very common that you lose EV just after studying. And I think if you are a perfectionist, I think you're just focusing too much on getting your strategy right in terms of playing the whole game, what the whole game is about, which is a mixture of your strategy, your opponent's strategy, future mistakes you or him can making it easier for you, just not get into like an awkward spot, like getting into, I don't know. So I think that's something that also is have to be careful, and I have experienced myself about after like diving deep into a configuration, going to the game and saying like, well, I'm worse than before. What the fuck?
Yeah, great example. I think it shows like often when you're in that perfectionist mindset, it's the mindset, let's get things right, let's not make a mistake or get things wrong. And as you mentioned, like that almost like robs you of creativity and robs you of like the bigger picture, because you're so focused on like the small details of remembering how to do a strategy correct, rather than like, all right, there's all sorts going on, there's all sorts of information, like let's play poker here. I think that's the...
And I think actually, let's not make a mistake, even though it's negative and you should, it's a better mindset than let's get it perfect, because let's not make a mistake leaves you a lot of leeway. Just don't fuck up. It's a good like strategy, or a better than like make the best play, the absolute best play. Just put some more pressure and like probably spend too much thinking about stuff that don't really even matter.
Yeah, I think the kind of the main kind of driving point after this is when you make a mistake, what happens next? I think that's when perfectionists kind of go wrong, because they make a mistake and then it's like, all right, now that I want to study that spot for the next 5 hours to like, so I don't do it again. It's just like this really, it's almost too serious relationship with the outcomes. So yeah, I think it's I think we covered in a lot of detail there, which was really good. All right, I want to do a bit of reflecting on your career, but I want to do it from a slightly different angle to usual. And I want to talk about your kind of self-improvements through poker. So I want to just touch on the version of you right now and the kind of the character traits you've had to develop to become who you are now compared to who you started. So looking back on yourself 3-4 years ago, getting into poker, what would you say you're most proud of the character traits you've had to develop on your poker journey?
I don't know if this is the one I'm most proud, but I do realize that I've always been like a person, like I think like I didn't usually believe in all the meditation stuff, but I thought it's like a little bit bullshit. And I did have to accept that, that sort of like spirituality to the game, that I think is necessary in a discipline where your mental state is so important, being to the not at the 100% because it's very hard, but being at the top of your game in terms of your ability to perform is so important that you need to be like do all those, write the journal, meditate, all that stuff that I always blew off of, it doesn't matter. I actually change a little bit and embrace it more, which is like to the friends and people that know me know it's really unlike me. I always been like not very modern in that spot. So I've improved in that scenario, being very open to lines or schools of thoughts about spirituality that I would always previously have dismissed and laughed off. So I think that's a growth in that regard about myself. And then I've also like became a little bit very like honest with myself and a little bit more driven and disciplined, even though I am messy at these days, but I think I was much more before. And I cannot think of more, but there may be some. I don't know.
What changed your mind with practices like meditation? I think you mentioned like you noticed like you wanted your mind in a good place, you wanted to perform at a high level, so you had to be a bit more open-minded to new ideas. But often it's when we've got like a bit of a fixed mindset around topics, it's very hard to like change our minds. So what was the kind of bridge that allowed you to embrace different concepts?
I don't know. I just try it. Like I'm open-minded at first, but quick to dismiss it. But when I try, so I tried a lot of that stuff, and then when it worked or like I felt better, I'm like, oh, let's continue to do it, right? So I think, yeah, I just tried it. It worked, or I felt better. Some positive loop reinforcement. Maybe you just run well after a session of doing that, and you're like, well, let's try it again, and then try again, and then it kind of stuck, and then all of a sudden it's part of your routine, or you just like to do it. But also understanding and like getting into talking a lot about, like, I think there's something I've just left out is like talking a lot about not only strategy but with your friends or your poker circle, just talking about like how do you feel about in the downswing, talking about your feelings and like, yeah, oh, you do that too, oh yeah, we're retarded, we need to improve, yeah, okay. And so then just saying that you're not alone and thinking, well, this is hard in so many levels compared to maybe a regular job. It has its benefits, it has its non-benefits. So being realizing that you need to dig deep and there's like less room for a mistake. Like, think about it, like in most jobs, you can just show up and you will get paid. Maybe in 2 years from now, you won't get the promotion because the guy worked harder, but you will still get paid. If you show up after going to a party, whatever, you will just, you will perform. Maybe they tell you, they I don't know, they tell you, bro, you cannot do that. But at the end of the day, you get paid. But here, you cannot show up unprepared or not ready because you just get smoked, and you will be like, you will be really living. It won't be nice. Like, you have to show up. Yeah, you have to like perform. You have to perform, and I think that's comparable only maybe to sports. To play people that play sports for a living. Like, whatever way you're playing today and this year is going to reflect on the contract you get next year. So whatever how you show up to play your sessions this month is going to impact the winning, the balance at the end of the month. So you better like do everything in your power to be the best you can be. And I think that's pressure, but also that instigates you and like motivates you to, I don't know, like read books about how to be better and like all of that stuff. That usually is not that important, maybe in other aspects, or you can maybe ignore it a bit more.
Yeah, I like that framing there of performance rather than showing up. And not many things do you have to always be switched on and perform at your best. Like you mentioned, sports probably a very similar analogy, but poker is like the ultimate version because not only will you not get paid, you'll lose money. You'll get like
Yeah,
a
exactly.
negative repercussion. So yeah, I think the incentives to want to perform well are higher. And as you mentioned, like from your peer group, it sounds like you were having conversations around what other people are doing. I think often like when we hear other players are doing similar practices or doing things, we're like, cool, that could work. It opens our mind to try it. And then once you get that sample size and experience that, this works for me, then you start doing it more. I think every habit, routine you can think of, it works for some people, doesn't work for others. So you've got to very, very experimental with your kind of approaches. And you're right, I'll give it a try. I'm open-minded.
Yeah,
maybe it works for me, maybe it doesn't.
And I think something good about, or pretty good about poker players is like, since it's such a unique niche, like not a lot of people, and it's very hard for someone outside of the game to understand what you're going through or whatever, or like what are the like swings or the mental stuff, how it impacts you. Whenever you find someone in a similar situation, like I'm sure every opponent that I play regularly on the tables, and if I ever saw him at a live table or whatever, I would just be very happy to get a beer with, of course, because you can just talk about and share so many stuff that other people will be kind of hard for them to understand. That at the end of the day, I think the poker community, most of it anyways, is really like friendly towards each other because you kind of know the guy is going through at the end of the day through something very similar than you. So I think that's pretty nice. And whenever you get to talking, you get like, I always, it's kind of hard to find a high stakes reg that is really uninteresting you're not interested in what he says or how he got there. I think it's like because they are usually very well developed in other areas of their lives and can give you a lot of interesting information or insights because they just, in order to get there, you have to. There's no other way, I think.
Yeah, I like that. Like you've got to almost level up your character to get to those higher levels because it's so brutal to go for all the kind of trials and tribulations. And yeah, I think as well, like a lot of players who struggle can get a little bit isolated and feel like they're the only person going through problems. They're the only one on the downswing. I know when like online grinders who just grind alone in the bedroom can definitely be guilty of that. And yeah, I think having conversations in a peer group where you're like, look, like we're all going through some tough times. We're all going through downswings. We all have self-doubt. It's normal. It's part of being a poker player. Welcome to the game. I think it's very reassuring for a lot of players on their journey. So I want to double down on something. I'll circle back around. You mentioned being honest with yourself. That's another thing that in your self-development. Talk me through like the challenges you've had with this, because I always feel like when you're being honest with yourself, it's often getting the parts of yourself that you don't like to the surface, admitting your kind of failed parts, the things that aren't firing in the right way, and then come to terms with them and like making improvements. But this is often hard for people because you've got to accept that you're not quite good enough yet or not quite where you want to be. So being honest with yourself, talk us through where that's led you.
I think first of all, I think being a good trigger for you to be honest is realizing if you are where you are, which is not that bad after all in terms of percentile, whatever stake you're playing, like if you're playing 1K NL or 500 NL, which is pretty high up in the ladder anyways, even if it's not the top. If you have a lot of mistakes and you got there despite of the mistakes, then all of a sudden, well, that just means you're doing some shit really good, and then that just means you probably can improve. So I think honesty or like acknowledging that you're doing stuff wrong is actually positive in some regard, unless you're just broke. In that case, well, maybe you need to improve a bit more. But so I think in that sense, it's liberating. I also remember like maybe when I said back in the earlier that maybe I should have tried harder in terms of basketball, for example. I think I came to terms with the fact that I sometimes do not try hard enough in some sports or procrastinate or something because it's very comfortable to look back into something you did and say and have the peace of mind of that you didn't try hard enough. So it's not that you weren't as good, it's just you didn't try hard enough. So not trying hard enough is a good excuse. But if you go all in and you fail, you have to face the inevitable truth that you sucked or you just were not good enough. But competitive as I am, you suck. So, and it's fine. You cannot be good at everything. So I think, for example, not trying and being honest with myself is a lot of my past stuff that I did. I didn't just go all in. I tried decently hard, but according to my standards, I just didn't try 100% or 95. And I think that might have been one of the reasons why. So trying to not do that again has been a challenge and still is. So I think that diving into like your past behavior and stuff and why you do it and how to fix it. I think that's why I mean, like being honest with yourself is important.
Yeah, that's a very interesting one as well, where you mentioned if you don't put all the effort in and try your hardest, you've got the kind of get out of jail free card of, oh, well, if I did try harder, I could have got a success. But also, those are the ones that lead to the most regrets. Like, as you mentioned, you look back in your basketball career, you're like, I could have tried harder. Not necessarily have got to where you wanted to be, but you're like, I know I didn't put it all on the line. And I think as you get older, that becomes way more of a regret, the things that you didn't put more effort into. But some people, as you mentioned, like hold on to this, like not going full in. I think I speak to players all the time who have this kind of, I don't want to fully commit. I don't want to be vulnerable to fail at this if I go all out. So for you, like you mentioned, basketball, you didn't do this, but with poker, you did. What was it like to one, maybe have to confront the fact that you wouldn't be good enough, which you didn't have to do with basketball because maybe you had a little bit I could do more. What was it like in poker when you actually decided, you know what, this is me. If I fail, I fail. I'm willing to take that.
Well, I mean, I think once you got to a certain level, you're like, well, I'm doing pretty well. Like, it's not that easy to get here. So I think I'm like sometimes being like conformist, like being, I don't know how to say like the word just slipped, but like I don't know, getting to a certain point being enough. Like not being, yeah, I want to get to the top, gonna get to the top, but sometimes you're like, well, this is not a bad spot to be. You can make a lot of money, much more than I would have done playing basketball, that's for sure. But like also maybe in a career in Argentina at least. So you know, like I could have a like I can like I don't know like live a comfortable life. It's not that bad, right? So and if I don't make the top, then you know I'm gonna be sad, but like the reality is the top is the top. Not everyone can make it. If everyone could make it to the top would be like this, super big, right? So at the end of the day, I think uh, it will become the time to accept that you're at your ceiling, and I think it's you just do it. I think it's there's only one Linus, right? There's only I don't know who the guy you guys think, but the best player, the top three, there's only three. There's not they're gonna beat 300, right? So you can and I'm also the thing in poker, which is and that is some of the stuff that I've been realizing lately. The amount of money that the top guy can do compared to the third one, it's not even. But like in terms of money, it just doesn't matter. Like maybe in terms of what glory, but like if you have access to the same games, you probably make the same amount of money. So, and at the end of the day, yeah, it's not, yeah, it's just ego maybe, which is fine, but like it's.
Do you feel like you needed to get to a certain level before you could have that kind of honest acceptance? Because it feels like, as you mentioned, as you're going through that maturity, you realize that not everyone can get to the top, and it kind of being honest where your ceiling may lie, but also like kind of going all in and go, right, I'm not going to cut myself. I'm just going to see how far I can go. But as we've talked about, that's not everyone's reality. Most people struggle with that because they don't want to confront that. So for you, I'm wondering, did you have to have this honest confrontation with where your limits lie, or what level did you get to where you're like, you know what, like I've kind of satisfied the ego. I feel like I'm kind of happy with where I've got to. And then you could actually just push on and play more freely.
I mean, I'm not exactly saying that I'm happy where I got to, but like if I kind of like can project myself or like see myself looking back in a couple of years and saying, let's say I get like this is my ceiling where I'm at now, and I was like, well, it ain't that bad, right? And like I also know that I really work really hard, and that gives me peace of mind. So that's yeah, that's.
What's your current definition of success?
That's a hard question, actually. I don't know. I don't really know.
If you could look back on your life when you're 80 years old, and you could look back on a life well lived, and you go, you know what, I'm pretty happy with that life I lived out there. What would be some of the things that would come to mind there?
Well, that's a very tough question, but like, yeah, at least doing what you wanted to do, being like having a lot of happy moments, being able to be free, which is something poker really helps with, especially on like a third world country like Argentina or like that you, yeah. So I think those are like good spots to start with, and yeah. I think success is like getting to like a decent amount of top percentile of players, and you know being and enjoying the process that got you there, as well as the actual part of it playing. So I think both those two things are I kind of like and I mean certain percentile because like you have to draw a line at some point. But I know getting decent at the game basically is what I mean, and everyone can draw the line wherever they feel like. It's just like a matter of like what's your like aim or whatever, and yeah, and also like in the future learning other games or other formats and being decent at those as well is also kind of like I think that would imply that you're successful because you can adapt. You can like you're still good at learning new stuff, even though you're probably older. And so yeah.
Yeah, I think there's also like two metrics. One's like an external metric of success, and the other one's an internal metric, like the happiness, the kind of freedom you've got. And if you have the external without the internal, you're always going to be unfulfilled. I think the internal without the external, we could still argue that's a pretty successful life. You're kind of happy, fulfilled, and you live a life on your own terms. But yeah, it's obviously a challenging one because the goalposts move in terms of what you're trying to achieve, and often we link achievement to success, especially through certain chapters. But yeah, I think you've covered a lot of the main components that I would class as like the main things around success. All right, so final question from me. What has been the best investment you have made in your poker career? This could be a coaching program and anything that comes to mind in terms of a best investment.
To be completely honest, in terms of return of ROI, like probably the first course I bought the guy at his home for like $20, that prompted me into having something to study during the pandemic. I mean, I guess that's the highest ROI. I guess, like, to be honest, like, you have to be 100% honest. And maybe I don't know if he will watch it, but like the Spanish coach I mentioned that like completely changed my mind about playing versus fish. I mean, that just paid, I don't know, like $500 for that and just apply that into like never ending and stuff. So I think that has to be it. And I think also like getting into the mind of recreational or like sharing and being, I think it's really good for other disciplines. So like, for example, playing live, for example, which I do enjoy a lot, and I think I don't know if a lot because it's maybe tedious, but I think it's interesting on its own, and it's a different beast, and you have to be ready. There's some adjustments they have to make, and but getting into how people think is a good thing, for example. Yeah.
Yeah, I think often those early investments, because of the compounding effect and how they open up
Exactly.
future doors, can have like so much of a higher weight in, because yeah, they're almost like the domino that knocks everything else over. But yeah. All right, Rene, for you, any investments you made early in your career that have had a disproportional compounding effect on your later career?
I think the best investment that I made in my poker career, very likely coaching related, probably mental game coaching. I think I've put a lot of dollars in that, both working with Jared, working with Elliot Rowe. I remember that was a very good investment. Working with Adam, a bit more nowadays. I think that for me has had definitely the highest return of investment. I guess also investing in like an office space where I could share like a similar environment with other players, and the kind of, if we can call that an investment, but obviously, yeah, you already have your rent, and I think I was paying like what, €800 a month or something, for a nice office with the guys. I think that was definitely also a very good investment. I wanted to ask Mateo some final questions before we let him go. He's already shared enough wisdom with us. What is the thing in poker you remain to have the most trouble with? What is the hardest thing about being a poker player?
I think for me nowadays, maybe getting into a consistent routine. I think my routine shifts constantly. I'm not very defined in that spot, mainly because like I don't have a family of that sort, so that just makes you be more free in that sense. And I'm already very messy in terms of maybe I go to sleep late, I decide to play a session late. So I think that's, my schedule is constantly changing sometimes. So I think that's something I do struggle with, and I think I would like to improve, because I think consistency is a little bit better. I also think that, for example, whenever sometimes you don't plan to play a session, and then you open the lobby and see, oh, okay, there's like a table going, which seems nice. I'll sit, and for some reason, and I don't know if it would be the best remedy to that, but like if I end up playing a session I did not plan to, I do get much more regret, like the fish regret that I should have gone to sleep and I would have saved that amount of money that I lost. And that in EV I did not lose that money. That session I played, even if I played slightly worse, I was probably winning money. And if I was just playing so bad I was losing, I just lost whatever my EB was, which cannot be a very big number. But I do get that regret, like a fish would say, "Oh, why did I went to the casino? Why did I went to the roulette before leaving?" You know, I get that regret much more often when I play a session I would not set up to play. Whereas if you like do your routine and play your session at the time you're supposed to play and you lose, you're like, well, you know, I'm a professional. I play, what am I going to do? So I think struggling to that, and I think to be honest, I think the solution is not to not play at that spot. I think this, if you want to be like a high stakes regular, I think the solution is to just don't have that regret after, because I think when you're targeting, when you're wishing to play a very selected game, like stakes that don't run very often, whenever they run, you have to make room for yourself. And I think something I also would like to improve going forward is being able to improve my B2C game, because if you get like a very good spot, you may have to play for like a very like long session. So actually, even though like we're always focusing on improving our A game, the reality is that if you want to, like, I don't know, play like, sometimes you're gonna have to play like 6 hours of a very good table, because that spot is really big in terms of your monthly or even yearly EV. Then you really want to have your B game or to a very high standard, and also know like, hey, when I'm tired, I tend to start doing this shit wrongly. So I'm gonna try and like not be ambitious and not try and like be like, accept your B game and accept there's stuff I cannot do. And if you maybe a hand that you defend versus 3 that is mixed, maybe you can fold it because the guy just sat down half an hour and you're playing for 4 hours. So he's going to be brighter than him, right? He's going to be brighter than you, right? At this point in time. So you probably can just, you know, give a 0.01 EV spot go, because you're not going to be able to maximize that EV at the point in time. So I think those kinds of stuff, I think it's more like the solution, not just not playing.
Yeah, once you play higher and higher, at some point it's like part of the job is more you're just being around your computer and ready for whenever it kicks off. I remember I had quite a lot of problems, or at least trouble with that as well. At some point I realized that I would just always quit my session. I think it was 6 p.m. You know, I would have like a window from 5 to 6. If the games are really good, I would push it 1 more hour. But I at some point decided for myself, I don't care how good the game is, I would just quit at 6. Like, for me, it was just not worth like breaking my routine, playing 2-3 hours longer, then being tilted, that influencing my grind the next day. I just calculated like, okay, how much EV can I really make in that extra 2 hours? Is it really worth screwing up like my schedule and influencing it the next day? But I also know that, for example, some other friend of mine, he kind of made some rules like, okay, if my EV is greater than X, I'll play. And if I play longer than 3 hours, I'll take the next day off because it already has compensated for, and that's kind of how you would balance it.
And I think to be like, this is where being honest with yourself counts. And I think you have to be honest with yourself and look yourself in the mirror and say, well, you know, my EV here, like, this is how much of a unique spot is this, right? And sometimes, like, yes, it's a good spot. You have one recreational, but sometimes you have a huge whale that it's just worth to stay 6 hours or whatever. It had his deep stack. So I think deep down, after the years of playing, you kind of know how, like, your EV, you can estimate it, and I think it's a good skill, like the George mentioned on his podcast. So I think that's a big thing, like weighting the pros and cons. And like you say, the next day you're probably not going to be able to function very well. And also, if you lose a lot of money, which, you know, it's within the realms of what can happen, even though in EV you won't, you will be like, maybe I should, since you did something extra or routinely, right, something that you don't usually do, you will feel a little bit more guilt. So that probably makes you, if you take a shot at a game that when you run bad just means you have to take 2 weeks off because you're tilted, then the EV of that shot then suddenly drops, because there's a percentage of the time you just don't win money for two weeks, right? So putting all of that into the...
And I've heard this as a trend throughout conversation as well. It's kind of taking yourself and kind of the human aspect in consideration when calculating your EV. I think you talked in some things earlier in this podcast as well. Like, oh yeah, this is more plus EV. Well, is it really if you take in consideration you and the impact that it's gonna have on you? Same
It's
what you said.
totally.
I remember in those times, if I would push longer or play more tables than I would normally, before that I would try to make conscious like, okay, I'm doing something that I'm not used to. Be aware, BC game mistakes will show up, and that's okay. If I kind of align those
Exactly.
expectations, then I'm okay with it. If I don't and have unrealistic expectations, play 2 hours longer and then make stupid C game mistake, I'm tilted. Why did I continue playing? Blah blah blah. I should have just stick to my schedule. Yeah, it's like a slippery slope.
Totally. I think acknowledging, that's why you have to be honest with yourself. Look, I mean, C game here, I'm only here staying because of that guy and that guy, maybe, whatever. The rest of it, I don't care. Like, and like it's kind of hard because your usual mindset, my usual mindset is not that, right? It's the opposite of that. But like you have to be flexible, I think. You have to adapt. And I think that's the skill that as a poker player you have to. There's no other way.
I know you as a very skilled cash game player. In the background, I see I believe that's a scoop trophy, W Coop trophy.
Yeah.
What's up
Yeah,
with that? You
scoop
play
for
tournaments as well? You know how to play everything?
no. No, this is no, I just played, like some friends started playing, and I think during Scoop I don't know why, I don't remember why, but I played a couple of turns. I actually bought a piece of a friend playing the Monte Carlo EPT, and he made a deep run. It was so fun because I would end like I would wake up in the morning, see, oh, he's 30. Like I was visualize my 10% of that tournament going to big. So it was really fun to sweat. So after that, I just like a couple of Sundays I played tournaments. I think it was exactly during Scoop, and I of black boxed myself into banking one tournament. But like yeah, they got the trophy, which is really sweet. They shipped it to my house. That's pretty awesome. But yeah, not. I would like to study tournaments. But I think it just has to wait a little bit. I'm going to Barcelona now to visit a friend and play the EPT. But yeah, I'm not a tournament player whatsoever, nor plan to be in the near future, I think.
I was gonna ask, like, how do you see the future of poker, and how do you see yourself in it? So you're not gonna transition to MTTs anytime soon.
I mean, transition is a big word, I think, right? Because like it would require, but like I think maybe getting into a spot where you kind of know the basics and like don't make like ICM punts or like huge punts, and being able to play, I don't know, the tournament series or like the goodie spots, like the best ones, maybe it's okay. To like dedicate like a month to study the basics and then become like decent. I think compounded with a cash game knowledge could be enough to like win some EV. But like I think like in every discipline, if you wanna like, my hourly is gonna always be better playing cash games unless cash games die or whatever. But like I think so it would be like pretty much a punt to go very deep into tournaments. But I don't know. Then I see again, I see a lot of the high stakes players playing the cash games one, playing tournaments. So you never know.
What would you like the main takeaway for our audience to be from the conversation that we had today?
I don't know. Just that maybe uh, that love and passion for the game comes a long way if you execute it, and then probably just don't be too hard on yourselves, and just keep working. I guess just don't yeah, don't be too mean on yourselves. I guess like I used to be, maybe. I don't know. And I don't know. I think it depends. Like I wouldn't say you have to be competitive because it's just that how it works for me, and it just works for me. But it doesn't mean it will be the same for everyone else. I don't think. And I have to go through my struggles because of that, and like toning the competition down. And I did some work with some mental game coach, and it did help me. So I think uh, everyone has their own, like I think maybe the a good takeaway is like be ready to look at yourself deeply within, and like see what are your flaws, what are your good parts, and build from there. Like fix the flaws, go around them if you can't, and potentiate, that's not a word, like build upon the good things that you do, and like push those. So I think, yeah, be ready to look yourself in the mirror, because and it's probably not going to be that pretty at the beginning, but this thing is helpful, and it's helpful for every aspects of life, I think. That's why I think, and I'm being a little bit maybe like, what the fuck do I know, right? But like, I think if you're a successful poker player, there's a lot of stuff that you can do other than poker, because you just overcame a lot of hurdles in your previous job. Basically, you just that I think allows you or prepares you to do. I'm not gonna say anything, because that's not true, but like a lot of things. So I think you can be happy about yourself.
Thank you, Mateo, for sharing your wisdom on the spot. It was a great episode. Adam, what are your main takeaways of our conversation today?
Well, yeah, very good conversation. I really enjoyed the competitive spirit that was coming out of Mateo throughout the conversation. And I do feel like that was one of his strengths in terms of turning that competitive fuel that he had from his basketball, from sports, into poker. And he mentioned in very interesting ways how he had to channel that kind of aggression that he's naturally got in a different way, think more strategically, think more long term, but he still got that kind of fire and that kind of competitive nature to him. And even said at the end, like, it might not transition to everybody else, but for him, that's what kind of gets him going. And also I think that allows him to move up stakes more effectively or quicker, because like when you're competitive, rather than like trying to succeed in the short term, you're like, okay, let's compete, let's see what I've got, when he's playing in tough lineups and playing tougher games. So I think that's definitely been a factor in his fast rise. Another thing that was really interesting was the biases conversation, when he talked about like understanding yourself and knowing what your biases are, especially when you're in different emotional states, you're in different fatigue levels, what are your kind of tendencies, and understanding them, and then how to deviate the opposite way. He mentioned like when you've got one strong bias, you often need to go for the opposite way to kind of correct that bias, which I thought was really good advice. It sounded like throughout the conversation, he's done a lot of work on building like awareness of his tendencies and how he shows up, and then being able to fix those things, which I think two different skill sets, and you can struggle with each of them. One, building the awareness is challenging, but then once you find the awareness to actually change a bias, like me and you, Rene, we talked about this before the conversation today, players can know the biases, but not be able to change them, still keep hammering home. So I think with Mateo, he was able to use the data that I've got a bias here, and to move past that, and to use it as a learning experience to get past. And then one of the final things, which was towards the end of the conversation, you mentioned being honest with yourself as a real key lesson. And that's got so many avenues as I've thought about that. It's like, you've got to be honest with yourself in terms of where you're currently at. You've got to be honest with yourself in terms of things you don't know and you need to get better at. And it's this like ability to go, right, like, I'm trying to get better. I'm imperfect. We touched on perfectionism a little bit as well, but I'm trying to get better, and I need to own the things I'm not quite good at yet, because I'm in the process of getting better. And he mentioned like a few things he does for that. But yeah, I think it's a very good skill to be honest with yourself, to know where you're currently at and where you can improve. And I think many players who struggle to make progress to the higher levels will often cap themselves with the inability to confront parts of themselves that they don't like. There's some really good work by Carl Jung, old school psychologist, who talks about the shadow. The shadow is like this side of yourself that you don't like, that you don't want to bring to the light. And I think Mateo was talking a lot about how he's brought his kind of character traits to the surface and been able to work through the things that have held him back. So yeah, really enjoyed the conversation. How about you, Rene? What are the main things you wrote down?
A couple of things that stood out to me. At some point, he mentioned when, battling against stronger players, he said, look for signs that they are human and chew on that. I really liked it. He said, chew on that. You look, okay, they're probably very good, but let me spot some weaknesses that gives you just enough, like maybe a little bit fake confidence, but to at least hop in. And then from there, you can actually build the true confidence that you need in order to, move up the stakes and start playing there. So, players putting other players on a pedestal when they move up, I think it's such a common problem. We hear it so often. And I think this one is really good. Analyze maybe the population above you. Look for a couple of general leaks that you can chew on that gives you just enough confidence to hop in. And I think, and Adam mentioned it in many podcasts as well, the only way we then actually build actual confidence is putting repetition in at that higher stake versus these tougher opponents. But this will allow you to kind of take that leap of faith in the beginning. And he also said, yeah, we have to realize, that how good they are. We all have strengths and weaknesses, them included and us included. Also in terms of realizing that when you make a mistake, it doesn't mean that you're now a bad player, right? He said, yes, I have weaknesses and they're part of my win rate, and I, don't give too much attention to it, right? It doesn't now make me a bad player. We also talked a little bit about changing a mindset from trying to make the perfect play all the time and going more from like an approach, make the play that can be bad. I think this is in general a great state of mind from which you can perform. Kind of hand in hand with that, he also talked about baseline strategies and simplification a little bit, that it has its place, but from there, we must look up to our opponent and try to look for different ways we can extract more value, right? I think when I asked him what is something that players don't think about often enough, he mentioned that, like, well, think about your opponent's range and your opponent's tendencies. And then he can look for that, because a lot of the studying that he did, he mentioned node locking, he mentioned Flopzilla, and he mentioned toy games. These all have nothing to do with spending hours in the solver trying to figure out what that they have to do, right? What's the strategy? No, he's trying to understand the mechanics of the game. And then once he understands the mechanics, kind of the cause-effect relationship of a strategy, he can then look at players' tendencies in game and think about, okay, well, where does my key come from versus this opponent? Or how do I generate high ZV versus this opponent, given the information that my opponent has given me? So those were kind of the main takeaways that I got from a technical side. Obviously, we can keep on going, because I think he just dropped bomb after bomb after bomb of good knowledge. So I want to thank Mateo again for sharing so much wisdom and being so open with us. I want to thank Adam for co-hosting the pod, asking great questions as always. I want to thank the audience for listening, tuning in, giving us love. Hit the like button if you liked this episode. Hit the subscribe button if you are not already subscribed. I want to thank the sponsors, Universal Poker, GTO Wizard. Go check them out. And I will see you guys in the next episode.